different priorities and a lot of different issues. And so my hat's off to those who are working for this. Final thing I'll say is just we've been very active in distributing funds that we received from the Federal CARES Act. We announced this distribution last month. You're looking at a pretty significant amount of money, $173 million Governor's Fund, $223 million Child Care Fund, and then 10% of the $770 million that was sent to school districts. So a large focus for us in terms of where we're putting the money is on reading proficiency. We want to have 90% of students proficient in reading by 2024. $64 million will be used to close achievement gaps. This will support 4 to 6 week programs on school campuses to students from kindergarten to grade 5 who are identified as having substantial deficiency in reading based on the most recent available screening and progress monitoring assessment and with teacher recommendations considered. We're going to do $20 million to engage school districts and schools in identifying and adopting the best reading curriculum and supplemental instructional materials to drive teaching and learning, particularly in those early grades, K through 3. $15 million will be used to train and develop 2,000 highly effective reading coaches, develop and deploy strategy for in-classroom support with reading coaches, and develop regional support teams to identify and assist students with reading improvements. $45 million is set aside as safety net funds for various scholarship programs. $8 million will be used to allow every public school student in 2021 academic year to take the ACT or the SAT free of charge. $5 million will be used to expand civic literacy in our schools. We also have a lot of money for workforce and job training programs, $35 million to increase capacity around short-term, in-demand technical certificate programs, market-driven and in-demand clock-hour career certificate programs, and in-demand industry certification preparation courses at our state and technical colleges. And one of the things I think that's going to come out of this period is when a lot of companies went to remote work from home, a lot of them in the white-collar world found they didn't really miss much of a beat. And they don't necessarily need to have the big buildings and office buildings and everything anymore. You can't, though, and I think that's probably going to mean they'll probably have fewer people employed over the long term. So that's going to be a concern. But then I also think that there's really going to be no substitute for some of this vocational hands-on skills that people need to be able to make the economy function in a wide variety of areas. And so we've put a lot of emphasis on that, and we think it's going to continue to be important. We dedicated $2 million for increased telehealth services for students who are experiencing difficulties, particularly with mental health during this period. Our Division of Emergency Management is going to coordinate with school districts across the state to survey school district needs for personal protective equipment and other sanitation supplies. And then finally, the $223 million Child Care Fund will be used for early learning programs, including $55 million to provide financial assistance to child care providers, infrastructure, personnel, cleaning supplies, and other costs to maintain a safe environment. $16.9 million in funding to high-quality child care providers who agree to reopen as part of the Florida's school reopening plan, and $18 million in funding for successful transition to kindergarten program to implement summer programs for approximately 45,000 rising kindergarten students identified with limited language and emergent literacy skills as determined by the voluntary pre-K assessments and teacher recommendations. So there's a lot of initiatives that are afoot as a result of some of the assistance that we received from the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and I know we're hoping for good things on that. And finally, I would just say, thanks for everyone throughout Florida for hanging in there, hanging tough during a really difficult period for our country and certainly for our state. I have no doubt that we're going to get through this. We've got a lot of strength and determination. We're gonna get it done. We're gonna do what's right for our kids, and we're going to continue to support our educators because those are the right things to do. So to the members of the board, I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know you guys have a lot of stuff going on in your own personal lives, and to take the time out to really be here for something that's so important, education in the state of Florida. I appreciate your service, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do over this meeting in the weeks to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Governor. We're going to move.
Okay, I want to thank the governor for coming and giving us that information today and for joining us in our meeting. I think that's the first time we've had a governor at one of our meetings. So, at this time, I would like to recognize Addison Davis, Superintendent of Hillsborough County Schools, to welcome the board.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Tuck, for your leadership, and Commissioner Corcoran for your leadership as well, and everyone on the board. We thank you for trusting Hillsborough to come back and to initiate your return to face-to-face, to really demonstrate to our communities in Florida that we have to create and start moving forward on behalf of children and doing it in a respectful, professional manner, and have, in practice, social distance, but have thoughtful meetings that will hold everyone accountable in order to create and open classrooms for our children moving forward. As a superintendent of schools in Hillsborough County, I've been here 4 months. It's the same time that, when I arrived in a manner that, with the first couple of days, we had to shut the school district down. So, it's been very interesting time to be able to lead, but I'm so thankful for the school board that I have in Hillsborough. We have our chair, Melissa Snively, along with Cindy Stewart and many other school board members that are here, but I appreciate them for being able to support us in this trying time. And my heart goes out to every superintendent, every school board member, and every teacher and administrator as we seek to find proactive solutions to serve our children every single day. As you know, we're in unprecedented times, and times that do agree in this emergency order that face-to-face is the best way to connect with our children. But I also agree and applaud the commissioner for allowing school districts to open up and be innovative along the way. One thing that I've learned over the last, last 4 months, that parents want choice. They want the ability to be able to select a pathway that's going to allow their learner to be safe, allow their learner to thrive, and continue to be exposed to high-level quality instruction with a high-quality teacher every single day. And in Hillsborough County, we will create that experience along the way. In addition, the emergency order goes on to talk about how school districts, school leaders, that we must actively engage our experts, the Department of Health and local entities, and also look at large business CEOs to figure out what's working, what's not, and what we can do differently. As a leader of Hillsborough County, we've done some great things. I've connected with the medical chief officer of Disney World, of Disneyland, and also the CEO of Publix, and also looking at talking to infectious disease doctors and partnering with many local hospitals to figure out how our reopening plans will look in order to protect every one of our children along the way. And the biggest thing I'm grateful for is the ability to allow local decisions about how we open and how we close and how we create the best experiences every single day. We know that many parents there's a lot of angst out there, and there are a ton of questions. And I'm thankful for our communities and around not only locally but throughout the state, for parents holding stakeholders, superintendents, and school boards accountable in order to answer questions and get it right. And I want everyone, if you're watching this, to know we don't have a playbook, and we are writing it every single day along the way. And we're going to get better every day. Every minute our plans are fluid. I will present our final plan, Plan 3, to the board tomorrow, and that plan will change as soon as I make a statement. Something could come up, but we have to be flexible, and we have to be able to create innovative educational models to serve our children. Really nice to hear the governor speak about the CARES Act. It is spot on. We have to address literacy. I love the bold movement with moving to 2024 with 90%, and the achievement gap is real. We haven't had learners in front of our teachers since March. And if we think that e-learning, when we transitioned, where we assigned and we graded, was the best way to do our jobs, we quickly understand that we could do better. But my hat's off to all of our teachers and our leaders, because we were developing it along the way. But we are primed and ready to go and transition as we open up in August, and we know others will have different models based on their phases and based on their community, but we stand ready to be able to address the achievement gap, the digital divide, and being able to create the most of experiences for our children that allow them to compete not only in the four walls we call our classrooms, but outside in our community, and prepare them for jobs that do not exist today. So I welcome you. I thank you. Thank you for coming. Trust in Hillsborough to keep you safe and put you in a situation where you can have storm and intellectual conversations that push every one of our educators to get better and to be primed to start the school year. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Davis. Okay, Commissioner, your report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Fantastic remarks, and we agree wholeheartedly and appreciate all the great efforts. And being a Bay Area guy, it's an honor to have you down here in the Bay Area doing great work. So thank you. Thank you also to the school board members who are here for the great work you guys are doing. First, I'd like to start off by recognizing 3 outstanding students who have really stepped up during this pandemic. I'll call you up, students, afterwards, and we'll take photos up here. Our first recognition is actually a double recognition. Brothers Tim and Bill Baptiste attend St. Pete College here in Tampa Bay area and have stepped away from their jobs at a free local COVID testing center to join us today. Bill and Tim knew they didn't want a career desk jobs in an office, so to speak, so they applied to be part of a unique partnership assisting African American men between the ages of 18 and 24, working towards rapid credentialing that leads right into the workforce. About 4 years ago, St. Pete College and the City of St. Pete began the PITCH program, providing instruction for tomorrow's collegians and hires. First, I'll emphasize the hires part, because once these two earn their certified medical assistant certificates from St. Pete College in 18, through this program, they immediately gained full-time employment at a local community health center. Since early March, Bill, age 21, and his brother Tim, 19, have been among the first faces greeting the public at a COVID-19 pre-screening area for those walking into the community center. Bill and Tim support the team with data entry and administrative needs at the site. Though a stressful and uncertain time for the patients, Tim says he receives many thanks and moments of appreciation from people coming through the testing site. Bill makes sure each patient knows he will treat them like one of his own, like he would want to be treated. The brothers are a perfect working team. Tim is good with children coming in, and Bill is good with the adults. Now it's time for the collegians part. The two brothers are first in their family college students and are role models for their 4 younger siblings, encouraging them to continue their educational goals. The brothers are practicing what they preach too, as they are both currently enrolled at St. Pete College in the Health Sciences Associate Degree Program. Tim wants to continue his education even further, planning to apply for a Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree program, aiming for an RN degree and eventually a nurse practitioner. We might see them in Tallahassee, since Florida A&M University is another program the two are considering. Bill wanted everyone to know, and I'm quoting his words, how appreciative I am to have a job now, but more importantly, how grateful I am because I come from the environment where most fail. St. Pete College showed me how you can make something of yourself. With an education, anything is possible. I love this story. It not only shows that our career and technical education programs really make a difference, but also highlights what I've been saying for a long time, as we quote Frederick Douglass all the time, but education is freedom. It's the uplifting of the human soul to the glorious light of truth, and when you give that to somebody, it changes not just their lives, their families' lives, and the community's lives. So congratulations to Bill and Tim. Next, I'd like to recognize Isabella Berger. Bella, as she likes to be called, attends Newsom High School and is a member of the Student Government Association. She's a straight-A student who is an inspiration to her peers and is committed to making her community a better place. During COVID-19, Bella has been active in her local community. She and her family collected clothes and household items and donated them to Lighthouse Ministries in Brandon. Bella also helped elderly neighbors take care of their yards and spread inspiration by painting rocks with uplifting messages and placing them around her community so others would find them and feel a bit of hope in these difficult and uncertain times. In addition to these acts of kindness, Bella volunteered at Metropolitan Ministry, sorting clothes for their on-site thrift shop, unloading donation trucks, and organizing the store. The ministry benefits the homeless residents in the community, and with this, I'm pleased to recognize Bella today. If you all want to come up. And now, Chair, just a quick update on our schools. Obviously, our goal, and you heard it from Addison Davis, our goal is to, and you heard it from the governor, is give our parents, keep our community safe, and give our parents the choices that they have, but have that whole panoply of choices available to them. We recognize, as most educators throughout the entire nation will say, is that being in front of a great classroom teacher in that room with the interaction between the peers is absolutely the best learning environment for a student. So we want to maximize that to the extent possible given the circumstances. As the governor said, obviously, and we have in our reopening plan, very specific guidance. If you're a teacher, if you're a student with someone back in your home that is in those categories of vulnerabilities, age or comorbidities, then obviously consult with your doctor, consult with the Department of Health, and make sure all those precautions are taken and all those learning environments are available. Obviously, we had tons of input in the last 90 days after the end of the close of the school year. Moving into the next school year, we had letters from the finance officers, letters from superintendents saying, how does it work going into the next year, which was the predicate for the executive order that we executed, and in a moment I'll have Alex Kelly come up and just kind of go through the CARES package and the executive order. But the executive order, in conjunction with working with our superintendents, as Superintendent Davis said, was to give them the flexibility and the understanding of what was available to them, what we expect of them, and how all of the money will flow with the various different modes of education. And so I think that it's a great executive order. I think it's given the flexibility. You hear it from Superintendent Davis, all our Bay Area, Superintendent Carvalho, all the superintendents I think have been very appreciative of that executive order because it gives them some sort of finality and some sort of sense of how to move forward for the next, especially for this coming semester. Obviously, we'll continue, and in that context, recognizing that for the fall semester for certain, we're going to have these different array of services until we see where we go with COVID-19, when the vaccine comes out, all those different types of issues that might be out there. But during that time, the emphasis that we started in the summer with the CARES package on closing that achievement gap and getting to 90% of literacy rate for third grade in 2024 is still first and foremost on our mind. And so as you look in that executive order, we're working with the districts to get that data to target those children who are struggling readers or maybe second language, and make sure that we close that achievement gap and that we move faster and more quickly towards a 90% third grade reading level in 2024, which, just to put it in perspective, nobody, no state, anybody, arguably worldwide, could brag about that kind of a rate. That's how aspirational that goal is, but we think we can get there. Right now we're at 57%. That shows you the leap that we expect. But if we dig in and we start, as the governor said, it goes all the way to rising kindergartners. We're grabbing those kids now with money from the CARES Act, grabbing those kids and helping them get on grade level for reading, and then doing it in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade when there's the first year of the full measurement. And so we think, and that's where we get to 2024, we need that run-up of the 5 years, but we think we can get there. And if we get there, the state of Florida, any city, Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, the entire state, the entire nation will be forever changed. When you get that kind of a reading level in third grade, all of those other things that we track and we look at can all be arguably tracked back to third grade. So when we look at our graduation rate, when we look at interactions in the juvenile justice system, all of those things, individuals' mental and social well-being, all of those things, we can go back to third grade because we see when those interactions happen in juvenile justice, when those interactions happen with dropout, we say, okay, where were they on third grade? And when you go back and look at third grade, they're in the 43%. They're not in the 57%. So we know if we can move that 57 to 90, we can eliminate just a myriad of those adverse incidents and troubles and problems and economic hardships that individuals have. And so it's a bold agenda, board. It is an excellent agenda. I think it's exactly where the focus needs to be. When we worked on our, Vice Chair Johnson, when we worked on our strategic plan, your comments on the achievement gap were put in there, and this is the attack method that we talked about even back then. So we're excited about that. I do want to have our Chief of Staff, Alex Kelly, and obviously I'll take a second to brag not just on Alex, but Bethany and Eric, Jacob, Melissa, everybody that's here, Matthew Mears. Our staff is second to none, and I don't think any staffer thought that we'd be in this kind of predicament having to do the work that we're doing, but they're doing a fantastic job, Suzanne, and I think we're well poised to get through this semester and move into an excellent legislative session. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll conclude my remarks.
Chief Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, board members. It's very rare you get to say that the governor, the commissioner, and superintendent did your presentation. So I will keep this brief as they really did cover many of the points here, and I'll just really re-highlight and drill in on a few components of the presentation to keep it short and save time for your questions.
Alex, if you talk a little louder, for some reason it's hard.
Sure. Thank you, yes, sir. Again, as the commissioner noted, as the governor noted, so much of this plan, so much of the work that we're doing now is in an effort to reopen school campuses from childcare on through post-secondary, in an effort to reopen safely to close achievement gaps along the way. And one of the ways that we like to look at this too is to recognize that our students go through critical transitions in their journey, whether that's in their early years in childcare when they're developing those basic skills that are going to pay off for life. In VBK, for example, whether they're learning their literacy skills in their early grades through third grade, a key time to make sure that students are on grade level, whether they're transitioning to high school and potentially transitioning into programs that are either going to accelerate them into college or to career education, and then whether they're actually graduating and then moving on to post-secondary, really supporting those students through this recovery so that those key transitions, those supports are there, and at the same time that we're measuring that and making sure that we're learning from that and building the supports even better and taking a crisis and turning it into opportunity. And so, as we noted, this plan is really focused around a few key outcomes in the act of trying to open safely. First off, to make sure that we improve educational outcomes. Secondly, to make sure that we recognize the total healthcare picture, the total health picture for a family, not just the question of health at the school, but the total health impact on a family. The governor hinted on that and talked about that earlier, and the issues that can occur at home if prolonged school closures are to persist. And then the health of our economy, and if parents can get back to work, if their children are at school, that affords them the opportunity to get back to work. We constantly remind ourselves that this plan is about that single parent with 4 or 5 kids who they have to have their kids in school in order to get back to work. They're depending on us. They're not in that group of parents who can telework and who might not be affected. The majority of parents have to get back to work in person. And so we know that this plan is about them and making sure that they have that opportunity because Florida's economy and their personal household is depending on it. The governor mentioned this earlier, and I'm not going to dwell on this long. Just this slide does emphasize some of the key things that can occur, unfortunately, the negative side if prolonged school closures persist because our family's basic daily routine is thrown off. And the stresses that are created in the household can, in an effort to deal with one issue, can create numerous other concerns. And so we know that our families are depending on us to get them back to normal so that the household, the normal functions of household can be restored. The American Association of Pediatrics, or American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a position paper for reopening recently, and it really is a wonderful document, and it really does highlight those key points about the comprehensive family health and how schools being open, school campuses being open helps comprehensive family health. It also is incredible for educational outcomes and the economy, and so we've used their quotes because they really do capture so well what the governor and the commissioner were talking about earlier. And then again, the economy side of it, I'm not going to dwell on these. These were pointed out earlier, but the Council of 100 did a survey during the course of this crisis to really identify and drill down on the issues that occur for a family if one or both parents are not able to get to work. And they really are significant impacts. And so we know that this work that we're doing here, the work that you're doing, is an effort to really restore those families to normalcy in terms of their household incomes. So recently, to support this work, as you know, the department on June 11th rolled out its plan for reopening in the CARES Act. Since then, we've done a number of implementation webinars and support calls. Our team's been very busy supporting all the way from early learning through post-secondary, particularly the school districts and the immense challenge that they have. And then last week, we rolled out the Executive Emergency Order 6. And since then, we've been doing webinars with stakeholders, school districts, charter schools, and private schools to support them in their crafting of their plans, which are due to us this month, supporting them and helping them get ready for opening schools and really answering the myriad of questions that are coming up in this process. So with the CARES Act, the governor actually gave quite a good a summary of the CARES Act, so I'm not going to go into all the details here. I will just say that most districts have already submitted their plans for the ESSER funds. That's the $693 million that the school districts get directly. Most school districts have also already submitted their plans for summer recovery, as have for rising kindergartner recovery. And right now, our colleges and technical colleges are also working on their plans for rapid credentials and for CTE equipment support. The next couple weeks, the plans that we talked about in terms of reading, progress monitoring, those will all roll out the next couple weeks to our school districts. Just to focus a little bit more on the executive order and just give a little more clarity on the executive order, what we've done here with this executive order that the commissioner signed is really create a new lane in terms of educating students, as the governor was mentioning earlier, giving students and those families that in some cases they want to return to school, and in other cases they're apprehensive and they're nervous and they might not return right away, but maybe they'll return in October or November. Give both sets of those parents options and make sure that when those families are ready to return, when they gain the confidence to return, there's a seat for that student in our schools. So we've created a pathway that in Florida law well articulates how in-person education, and federal law does as well, in-person education needs to go. And Florida law well articulates how full-time virtual education will occur. But there really wasn't a sort of middle ground that allowed for, let's say you have a situation where 15 students are in a classroom and 6 of those students are wanting to learn from home because those families are nervous during this time of recovery. This executive order creates a pathway for both of those conditions to occur. And so then when those students are ready to return, there's a seat for those students and they're supported throughout. And if those students should happen to be English language learners, ESE students with a disability, if there's some other type of at-risk student, low-income student, all of the protections that are afforded for those students in state and federal law, those have to be maintained. So this order also set out a level of expectation that while those students are potentially transitioning during the course of the school year, we recognize that we may have some students, because of a particular family issue, return to school right away. Maybe in October they go back home for a few weeks, they return again in November. That might be a frequent occurrence during the course of the year. So we want to make sure that that student, particularly if that student's an at-risk student, that the supports are in place, the flexibility is in place, as the superintendent referred to earlier, the flexibility is in place to support that student, to make sure that the expectation is set that that student's rights, their right to an equitable education, is preserved throughout. And then the order provides a level of financial stability for our schools and our districts as well, so that as they're doing their part, as they're serving both those parents and those students who are ready to return and those who are concerned, they have a level of financial stability throughout the process, knowing that they have a certainty that they're going to be supported by the state because they're making their best effort to serve all of those students, particularly our at-risk students. That's overall a summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Have any questions from the board? Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, Alex. And Commissioner, I just want to thank you, too, for your order. I know the governor outlined a lot of that, and I do think that it's helped to provide some leadership from the state, some clarity on what our ultimate goal is. One thing that I think is evident, but I just want to make sure that it's clear, Alex, on some of this, and I've got a lot of, and I know we have too, a lot of communications from parents who, obviously feel a lot of angst about the idea of their kids going back. I think we also understand that different parts of the state, different counties, different school districts are in different places. South Florida is in a different place, I think, than some other places, and in different phases too. And I think one of the things that I have heard that a lot of the angst is that the state and the commissioner in particular has come out and said that schools have to be open. We're ordering it, one size fits all. But what I'm hearing from you in reading this order is that there is a lot of flexibility here, and we are deferring largely to the local school districts to make a lot of these calls, and as the governor mentioned and the commissioner mentioned, to look at innovative ways at how to get there, but at the same time setting the goal that, listen, we understand that students learn best face-to-face in person. And so how can we get to that goal while understanding and addressing the realities on the ground? Can you just highlight a little bit about the flexibility in here that allows the local school districts to innovate and to make those decisions based on, as we know, the constantly changing circumstances in regards to this, in regards to the virus that is changing every day?
Absolutely, and thank you. So the order has a few layers of flexibility that I think are really critical. First, the order starts out by acknowledging that our school districts all have, and our individual schools all have a relationship with their local Department of Health, the State Department of Health, and that's essential. And so nothing in the order is going beyond that, a key consultation, that key relationship that occurs with our state and local departments of health, with all of our schools and all of our districts across the state, which is absolutely essential. The order also essentially creates a level of financial certainty for that student. If that student's moving back and forth during the course of the year, there could be just concerns within the household. There could actually be individual family issues. If a school, in the unfortunate event, had to close briefly for whatever reason, the order gives a level of financial certainty that the funding for the school districts is going to remain constant as it was projected and decided upon in the budget that passed the legislature and was recently signed by the governor. So the order gives that, while the districts are dealing with the challenge of the individual level concerns and a family that's rightfully maybe has an issue that's temporary in the home. Perhaps there's a loved one in the home who has a medical vulnerability, and so they're nervous for a period of time about sending the student themselves, or just because of the family member in the home, they're nervous about sending that student to that school. The school districts know that if they're doing their best effort to meet all the educational requirements, instructional hours, days, if they're doing their best effort to serve students who have different at-risk issues and have different state and federal legal requirements that serve that student, then they know that their funding is going to be held constant. So they're getting that certainty while it is that student and that family are rightfully exercising their freedom to be educated where they're comfortable at that moment.
Mr. Chair, if I just might say on that, I think, so it's almost like we have essentially two layers of flexibility. Number one, we have flexibility to the school districts based on, to come up with their own innovative method. But then we also have flexibility with each family, and each parent has the ability to make the decision and choose the best option for their child, as I understand it. Thank you.
Vice Chair Johnson.
This is Mike Olnick.
Hold on just a minute, Mike. Marva's up, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, it's hard. You can't see things. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Did you say it's hard to hear?
See things.
Oh, see. Oh, gotcha. You can watch us on the Florida channel. Just need a good broadband connection. Thank you, Chief. And I actually want to join the Commissioner in thanking the entire State Board of Education staff. I know you all have worked tirelessly, and although everything that you do requires a great level of detail, attention, and thoughtfulness, this is especially concerning because it's not just focusing on the education outcome and a high-quality education goal, it's also impacting directly our students' health. So I just want to thank you all for everything that you're doing to be very deliberate and very detailed about how you're helping to support our schools and our families in this process. I also just wanted to second what Mr. Gibson is noting in terms of the flexibility, and it's more of a comment than a question, Chair, and it's simply that I feel like a lot of people are not appreciating the flexible programs that their students and families will have access to. And I'll ask this of Superintendent Davis, and I know we'll have this conversation many times between now and school starting, is find ways for us to help you with messaging and clarity, because I hear more confusion than clarity, and it's not, I don't think, for lack of our team's efforts. I'm just trying to figure out how we help cut through some of the morass and some of the confusion that I think parents are having to suffer through in this process. So to the extent that we can be helpful, I know that, for example, Orange County had a poll on their website that allowed for parents to weigh in. I'm sure Dr. Davis or Superintendent Davis will share some of what he's done in Hillsborough County to help make sure that parents are weighing in and get good information. But it would be helpful to me, and I'm sure to our families, if we try to focus on ways to cut out some of the confusion that they may be getting from other sources, and give them that laser focus in understanding the flexibility.
Mr. Olnick?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to take a couple minutes, if I may. Can you hear me? Because obviously I'm remote. Am
Yes,
I
sir.
audible?
We can hear
Okay.
you.
First of all, I wanted to thank Alex and Jacob and Suzanne and Eric. I was privileged to listen to many of their Zoom presentations, and the hard work of them and the Commissioner is appreciated. My concern, though, is focused on the emergency order, and there's some things that I'd like to just discuss. One, today it's being referred to as an executive order, but at the time on July 6th, it came out as an emergency order. That was also the day that the President tweeted, all students shall go back to school, or something like that in caps. So when the emergency order came out, and I'm going to focus on one aspect, because many of the aspects of the order were necessary and are necessary, as discussed by other board members, including FTE relief, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the problem. The emergency order focused specifically on all schools, brick and mortar schools shall be open, I'm paraphrasing, for 5 days, unless you get an opt-out from the Department of Health or the State Department. That is the problem. That is what caused the confusion, and that is what causes the fear. The rest of the order and the things we're talking about today make sense. What needs to be rescinded, in my mind, is that aspect that all schools must open. Because, first of all, I think, with all due respect, this order should have been brought to the State Board of Education before it went out. We should have had the opportunity to discuss this. We didn't. And the other aspect is the school boards, and Chairman, you and I were both board members. The school board has the legal authority to operate, control, and supervise. In my mind, the state, the DOE, should offer help, assistance, guidance, as was reflected by at least 2 other state board members previously. Help in the flexibility, help on these things. But what needs to happen, in my mind, is we, or you, Commissioner, need to rescind that 5-day-a-week, because what I'm hearing today about flexibility and all the things we're doing to help them is contrary to that mandate of 5 days a week. I heard from one school board member as late as this morning saying she didn't think the Department of Health in her county would ever agree to a closure. So let's remove those impediments. Let's be helpful and give the guidance. But if the school board, whether it's Broward or Orange, if they think in their best interest that they need to close schools, then we should be supportive of that. And that's the confusion. If they have to open 5 days a week, and that's the mandate, well then that's contrary to everything we're saying here. And to look at some of the issues specifically, I agree that Pediatric Association coming out was wonderful, but they backtracked on that. There's so many issues of science that we don't know. Transmission, we don't know. There's so many questions. Even the payment for PPEs. I heard from one school district, they are struggling to buy them on the open market because they're competing with states and counties and companies. So there's lots of issues that need to be addressed. The health of teachers, the health of students. I don't need to go into that because I think we're all on the same page. And we all want brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is what has made all of us who we are, the brick and mortar experience, and I want that for my grandchild as well. But I'm going to close by saying, please, Commissioner, the executive order was a good idea, but it wasn't. It came out as an emergency order. It became to some degree political in many people's eyes. So let's backtrack on that brick and mortar and keep the rest of the order intact. Thank you.
Commissioner, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Mike. First, let me, to one of your earlier points, say that on that Monday that we released the emergency order, probably starting around 8 a.m., obviously the President of the United States and myself went back and forth on the phone probably 20 times. And I said, I'll release the order, and then you make sure you do this. It was very, very well coordinated, and it's great to speak to him on a regular basis like that. Obviously, I'm being completely tongue-in-cheek, Mike. I mean, an emergency order like this, was, weeks in the offing. I can't control, when or what the president tweets. And I've never had a conversation with him. I'd love to, but I've never had one. But that's second point that you raise, Mike, is, and you guys mentioned it too, we can't control those other sources. When those other sources immediately started writing what they thought they heard or read, all we basically said to them was, please read the order, because guess what they hadn't done? None of them have read the order. Not one of those sources that were printing stuff and writing stuff and working themselves into a frenzy, I'm speaking in the print media, did. Now, some of the print media got it right. One of them's here. I think I'll give a credit. Jeff Solchek read the executive order and wrote a great article. The other ones didn't read it, and I can't control that. And the third part is that, no, what this executive order does, Mike, the emergency order, is it gives complete flexibility, complete stability, financial stability, and complete accountability. And part of that flexibility is if a parent would like to have their child in a bricks and mortar classroom with a teacher in front of them 5 days a week, they absolutely should have that option, and it will not come out of the emergency order.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Mr. Gibson?
And
Mr. Chairman?
Point of clarification on that.
Hold on just a minute, Mr. Grady.
I think obviously when, and I just want to make sure it's clear what you're saying, Commissioner, is that essentially we're setting the goal, right? We're setting the goal and we're saying that this is the optimal place. And if you can do it, you need to do it because, I mean, this is how we've run education for, decades. However, if the circumstances are on the ground, there's a ton of flexibility in which you can get to a place to where you ultimately can reach that goal. Is that?
Yeah, and it's not just the tradition of having done it for 20. It's the, as you heard from the superintendent, you heard from any superintendent, not just Superintendent Davis. It is the most efficacious way to get a child that world-class education that gives as again, I'll continue to quote him, but as Frederick Douglass says, that's what gives us dignity. It's what makes us human beings is a world-class education. And so we know the way that it's delivered best, and we're gonna fight the best we possibly can in the safest manner that we possibly can to give that to that child.
Mr. Grady, did I hear you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to weigh in on the subject of the board's responsibility relative to the commissioner's responsibility. And I think it's important to reset the expectations of a board. I think that the number one job of any board is to hire a leader, to hire a CEO, to hire a manager, in our case, to hire a commissioner, to set a clear agenda for the commissioner, to allow the commissioner to execute on that agenda and to hold the commissioner accountable. It's the governor's job, it's the commissioner's job to lead. Leading is hard. At stake in reopening our schools is the future of the country. That sounds a little bit like hyperbole, but it's not. If you look at everything we do every month, every day at the board, at the department, in all of our schools and all of the districts, we are dealing with kids who will at some point be the leaders in this country. What they are experiencing right now or not experiencing is very, very difficult or impossible to measure relative to what we can measure, which is the daily count that we see in the headlines for the COVID virus. But what is, I think, unquestionably true is that all kids are harmed by not being in school. So the question is, how do you weigh a clear threat to a young child's education against a murky risk to their health? And reasonable people can disagree about how to answer that question, but I think leadership is critical at this time. We have 67 school districts in the state of Florida. We have to have one voice, one leader. That doesn't mean one size fits all. The commissioner's made that clear. The governor's made that clear. The executive order, which is a misnomer, the order from the commissioner, made that clear. If anyone bothered to read the entire order, I think it was spot on. I think it was timely. I think it's essential that people understand both sides of the argument. I think it's essential that people understand that kids are harmed by not being in school, and the support that that order will give the districts in making their own individual determinations is essential. So I want to applaud the commissioner and the governor for their leadership at this time, and as a board member, I fully support them.
Thank you, Mr. Grady, for those comments. Very well said. I also just wanted to remind everybody, because as I noted earlier, I believe that there tends to be a great deal of confusion, that one of the things that's also important is to support those families that need the brick and mortar opportunity for their students to be in the classroom. So that flexibility has to go in both directions. And so I want to applaud the commissioner for his leadership, because there are families who actually need that option, and to remove it, I think would be short-sighted and not fair, and wouldn't show the compassion that this board is committed to showing to all of Florida's students and families. So I want to again commend you for being thoughtful and making sure that we had good flexibility to support every opportunity for advancing our high-quality education goals.
Mr. Petty.
Just weigh in briefly. I think, looking back over the past month or so, prior to the executive order, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of angst about what would happen. I appreciate the leadership, Commissioner, in setting some milestones, putting some goalposts in front of the state, right? Putting it in front of these districts to say, here's what we know is the best possible path forward. Again, allowing for the flexibility for districts to work to build their own plan, to give families, as the governor said, an array of options, give parents choices for their own children. So I appreciate the executive order does that. But the lion's share of comments that I get in my inbox from community members and concerned parents is that their districts are not, or may not, give their child the option of being in the classroom. And so I think, again, the executive order sets the groundwork and framework. I hope our districts are working to give every parent and every child that wants to be in a classroom the option to do that. And for those that choose not to be there, that's okay. We've got the flexibility built in. But again, the lion's share of comment I get are concerns about districts that aren't making that or may not make that possible for every child. And I think that's where my concern lies. So I hope that what the districts hear from us very clearly is that let's work to get those classrooms open for every child that wants to be back in there. Let's do it safely. And for those that are uncomfortable for whatever reason in having their child back in that classroom, there are options. And those districts have the flexibility to create those options. I'll finish by thanking the staff for obviously, this is a bit the work you do day in and day out to make education work in the state of Florida. I can't thank you enough. The staff has been very responsive to every question I've had, every concern I've had, every question from a parent or concerned citizen. So thank you for that. But this is above and beyond because of the nature of this pandemic and the flexibility and ability to react to it and respond to it. I want to thank the staff at the Department of Education for your efforts in putting this plan together. And I know plans change, as the superintendent said. These things change, and they will change the minute you print them. You've got to make a revision, and that's okay. But the staff has done yeoman's work in getting that to where it needs to be. Thanks.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the commission?
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This is Mike. Can I have one follow-up, please?
Yes,
thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Two things. I appreciate what Member Grady said about the hiring of the commissioner and delegating authority. I 100% agree. But with something as important as opening or closing of schools, and something as important as a pandemic and how it affects our students, our teachers, our non-professional staff, etc., that I think is different. And I think if it wasn't, no one's calling it an emergency order anymore. And everybody's now calling it administrative order. At the time, it was an emergency order. So I don't understand, and this is no need to respond. In my mind, there are times, we are the State Board of Education. There are times that we should have advice and consent. We had nothing on this, number one. Number two is this. Everybody today is saying the same thing. They're lauding the commissioner and the order for its flexibility. What I'm saying is, and I've read the order like everybody else on the board, the question that I have is, if you look at the order dealing with the brick and mortar aspect, in order to opt out of brick and mortar, it discusses Department of Health, the local health department, etc. What I'm suggesting is that's contrary, and that is what is confusing to districts. If, in fact, they have flexibility, and we're acknowledging their statutory role to determine of their district, then let's say clearly that there is no brick and mortar requirement. We're leaving it up to the districts. They have their own scientists or doctors that they're consulting with. But to some degree, what we're saying is duplicitous. On the one side, we're saying flexibility. On the other side, we're saying on the order itself, the emergency order, it talks about the opt-out, and that opt-out is dependent on certain conditions. And that's my concern. I'm not going to beat this dead horse anymore. But I think that there is a disconnect, which is what caused the problem. If the order came out and didn't mention or said that school boards have total flexibility on opening and closing, and we will support you, that's one thing. But that's not what it was said. So thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it.
I don't want to belabor the point, but I think Member Gibson said it best. I think it's exactly what it says, that the paradigm in which we educate our children is bricks and mortar, and we're going to give you complete flexibility to go outside of that bricks and mortar program with your consultation of the Department of Health, and you can do these things. So it has full flexibility, full understanding for the district on how they're funded for this, so they have financial stability. And then it also has the accountability piece to make sure that whether you're a child in Monroe County or a child in Escambia or a child in Duval, that we're not going to let one child in one segment of our state not get the education that they deserve. And before I forget, I keep looking out and I see people, Chair, that I forget, but also staff that I didn't mention is Taryn Fensky, who works around the clock, Chancellor Hebda, and Dr. Dre Graham, who was the Teacher of the Year and is now running our choice office. All of these guys have been working around the clock. So as I look out there, I know I've forgotten a few people. I just want to make sure they get mentioned.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the Commissioner's report?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.
Got a motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the May 13th board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, due to time constraints, I'm going to change the order of the updates. Now we will hear an update from Joe Pickens, President of St. Johns River State College and Chair of the Florida College System Council of Presidents, and you will have 10 minutes. President Pickens.
Thank you for the opportunity. Before I begin my prepared remarks, let me mention a couple of people. The first is Dr. Angela Falconetti, who's the president of Polk State College, who is the incoming chair of the Policy and Advocacy Committee, so is the chair-elect of the COP, who couldn't be here today. It's my goal over the next year of my chairmanship for each of you to get to know me and Dr. Falconetti better, so that there will be a little bit more consistency in the presentations, and I hope even more so the relationship between the Council of Presidents and the State Board of Education. And one way to start that is, in whatever way we can, have conversations amongst us. And I want to mention that term, conversation, on more than one occasion. I'd be remiss if I didn't say hello to Superintendent Davis, who served us and my college in Clay County in a manner that resulted in him being hired away by Hillsborough. I guess that speaks for itself. Our loss at St. Johns River and Clay County is certainly Hillsborough's gain, and it's great to see you, Superintendent. Third, Holly Pickens. Well, who's Holly Pickens? Holly Pickens is my sister-in-law in Crescent City, Florida, who taught and coached for over 30 years and left her role as a coach and a teacher early, largely at my insistence, to run for and be elected a school board member. I told her, having been a school board attorney for 17 years, I knew what she was getting into and everything would be fine. We're still speaking today, but it's a little bit strained. But there are hundreds of Holly Pickens in the state of Florida, representing all of the folks who have run for school board and offered themselves for public office, as did I, who are going through a very difficult time. Well, then you add to that the Florida College System board members, all of whom are successful and busy people who have left their roles, at least for a time, to make decisions that are as tough right now as they have ever had to make in their successful careers outside of education. And so have you. Every one of you have made that same commitment and sacrifice, and I want to thank you for that. These are not easy times, and that's why, in my opinion, Putnam County needs the Holly Pickens of the world to be on their board and make their decisions, and that's why we need you to be members of the State Board of Education today and tomorrow to make the decisions you're going to have to make. This message was not approved by the Florida College System Council of Presidents in political terms because we haven't met. But it is approved by Joe Pickens, and Joe Pickens has this to say. Florida College System, ladies and gentlemen, is open for business. And we are all open for business, all 28 of us, in a different way, not just within ourselves, but among ourselves. We are open for business and will be, in the fall, different in Palatka than we will be in St. Augustine. And that's the experience that the Florida College System institutions are going through right now. But make no mistake about it. We were open for business on February the 13th, open for business on March 13th, and we'll be open for business on September 13th in whatever way our students want us to be, which is going to be a combination of online and, yes, in-person instruction. And not just in workforce where it has to be, but in arts and sciences for those students where it needs to be. That's what we are going to do. What comes out of a pandemic, in this case, one thing, our online instruction at St. Johns River State College is better now than it was a year ago because we improved out of adaptability. It's what the Florida College System does. I don't want another pandemic to bring on the next biggest improvement at St. Johns River, but we made the best we could out of these lemons. And our online instruction for the benefit of our students will always be better going forward than it was in the past. Number two, let's talk about a genuine seamless system of at least K-16 where you are the governing board. In my relationship with SREB, we are, I can assure you, the envy of many states across the country for many reasons, including that one. You have a unique opportunity to oversee how are we going to transition students from the 12th grade to college, not to the 13th grade, to college, when they have missed the for some, the most important experience they have in getting college ready. I would agree with the commissioner that the third grade preparedness is the most significant indicator of not just whether students are going to be in prison or successful. It's going to determine whether they're college ready when they leave Superintendent Davis. Well, this interruption has given rise, I think, to a conversation we need to have, not about remediation, but about preparedness, college preparedness. I believe that this board should consider, in conversation with us, whether we should be allowed to offer more preparedness instruction at the college level. And what's the difference of a name? Well, to me, there's a big difference between somebody taking a remedial class and a college prep class. We need to have that conversation for the many students, not just this year, but probably next, who need to come to us, and through no fault of their own or the school district, don't have quite the educational foundation that they need to be successful taking college credit at this time. We want to help them. We need to help them. We should not set them up by failure for putting them in classes that they are not prepared for yet. We have resources that we should use, and one of those is the Southern Regional Education Board. Thank you, Commissioner, for your commitment to SREB. SREB is here to help us. I'm on a task force about reopening colleges and K through 12. That task force isn't designed to tell anybody what to do. It's an opportunity for conversations among the member states on how everybody is facing the challenges that we all are. And I invite us as a state to use SREB as a resource. For 25 minutes today, 3 of the 5 members of the SREB board from Florida were in this room, and myself and the governor and Karen Hoffman, who is behind me. We're not here by chance or because it's geographically convenient. We're here because we care, and we're involved with SREB because we believe in their commitment, and we believe that Florida should use that resource to the best extent that we can. Number 4 and number 5 are together. Let's talk about budget cuts and whining. When I was cutting the state education budget in the fall of 2007 in a special session, Commissioner, you were there, and in the regular session in 2008, the one thing I think we all hated the most was the whining. Don't do it to us. We can't stand it. We can't this. We know. I hope that I can advocate for the Florida college system without whining. Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely hope that, because if I can't, then I have failed my college and I failed my system. The governor's executive order recognized the value, not the executive order, his veto order, of the Florida college system by leaving our funding intact. We appreciate that. The governor's veto message also says this, and I quote, "This action, known as the 6% release holdback, will curtail state agency spending during the upcoming fiscal year to allow for review and potential reduction of non-essential state services and programs." Close quote. You are a governing board. I submit to you that governance and advocacy are not mutually exclusive, nor should they be. And here's what I'm suggesting. And this message is approved by the Florida College System Council of Presidents. The Florida college system is not a, quote, non-essential state service. We were essential February 13th, we were essential March 13th, we're essential now, and going forward, we may be more essential than we've ever been before. I ask you to advocate on our behalf the fact that the Florida college system is not a non-essential state service and should be spared or mitigated from the holdback. The legislature is going to make their cuts, and that's their job to do, a difficult job that they will have next spring. But you can advocate for the essential service that you govern, and that is the Florida college system in this day and this time. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your comments, your understanding, and I appreciate the conversations that you are going to allow us to have with you coming forward.
Do we have any questions for President Pickens? Mr. Gibson?
Thank you, President, for being here, and we do value the college system, and we'll be your champion. I know you might not be able to talk about every college and how they're dealing with reopening, but can you talk a little bit about your college and what your plan is going forward?
I can, and as I alluded to, our plan actually may very well be different in each of the 3 counties based upon how our students tell us they want to receive instruction. Right now, we do have a pretty substantial menu of in-person classes. Remember, I'm always setting aside workforce because there are so many workforce programs that just cannot be delivered virtually. But within the arts and sciences, which is still our bread and butter, we expect to see a significant uptick in online classes because they're more used to it. But online classes are not going to be what you and I think of. Well, you're online, you do the work whenever you can, you submit it when you're supposed to, but rather having real-time online where you have a class, and your class meets at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you are sitting down and you are interacting with your professor, so it's really a much better experience than just the typical online. We're talking about having students, let's say it's a class of 25, well, 13 are going to meet on Tuesday in person and 12 are not, but they're going to be there with them via technology. Then on Thursday, that flips. And so everybody that wants to have the in-person experience can every week and participate with their colleagues, their fellow students on the Tuesdays when they're not in class through the technology that frankly has been funded some out of the CARES Act money that we're using. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm interested in understanding a little better your comment on the need to work more on preparedness. And I know some of our universities do summer programs before the students enter in the fall. I also am, like Member Gibson, very committed to being a champion for our state colleges. They're a source of pride for the state. The performance of our state colleges, the Aspen designation speaks for itself. So I'm a little surprised because I see the outcome and the outcome looks exceptional. And so I'd love to understand better the challenge of preparedness. And maybe it's changed between, where we were 3 to 4 years ago and what we're able to do now, but I want to have a better appreciation for that concern.
It's certainly exacerbated now, and it will be over the next year or so. It's just the fact that nationwide, this is not a Florida problem, and believe me, most other states are worse than Florida, that close to 60% of recent high school graduates are not prepared to do college work for college credit in some subject. A lot of it's math, but not all of it. Previously, we were allowed to, based upon test scores, direct students into a college prep class. You will not hear me, this is the last time you're going to hear me use the R word, remedial. We weren't particularly successful with those students, and so the light shined on us in that way. It doesn't mean that they're not necessary, it means that we need to do better by them. And so I still advocate for the fact that there are a number of students that have a high school diploma or have a GED that want to get an AA degree or an AS degree, and they don't have the educational foundation in some subject to allow them to be successful. It's a pretty easy Google search. What's the level of college readiness for recent high school graduates? It's not Superintendent Davis's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's an occurrence. You heard Commissioner Corcoran mention probably the single most important thing in determining college readiness for recent high school graduates. And it wasn't something that Superintendent Davis superintendent can do anything about. It's where were those students when they entered the first grade, and more importantly, where were they when they are in the third grade? We can tell who's going to be college ready by looking at third graders, just as y'all can tell what your high school graduation rates are going to be by looking at third graders. The difference is that in Florida and every other state in the country, including New York, that has those revered Regents exams, the minimum requirements to graduate from high school in the United States of America, including Florida, is not the same as the minimum requirements to be ready for college work, for college credit in all areas. We have to recognize that that difference exists, especially perhaps for students who missed the last semester of their senior year, where they might be getting that critical course that is the difference between bringing them up to college ready or not, or missed part of it, and talk about it. This is not about pointing fingers or allocating blame. This is about the unique opportunity Florida has, that we have a governing body that governs us and K-12 and is in the unique position of bringing us together to talk about how do we bridge that gap. There are a lot of gaps, Madam Vice Chair, and that's one of them that I think that we should talk about going forward.
Any more questions? Mr. Grady or Olnick or Mr. York? President Pickens, I just want to commend you on one thing. You literally said your last word when that red light went off, so that's about the most efficient use of time I've ever seen. So,
Thank you very kindly.
okay, moving to updates. I'd like to now recognize Bethany Swanson, Deputy Chief of Staff, for legislative updates.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. It's an honor to be here today, and we'll be going over our legislative update and let you know what happened in this past session. We thank all of you for helping us get here. We also have to thank our team at the department. Commissioners mentioned a few: Liz Moya, Jared Oakes. There are legislative affairs directors, as well as Jessica Fowler, who works in that office, and Ryan Walsh, our amazing gubernatorial fellow, and all of the divisions and their leadership, who it really is a team effort, not only in the department, but in the House and in the Senate, as well as in the governor's office, for really making sure that education remains a priority in our state and that we're able to move forward our students in the best way possible. I'll quickly go over some of the budget highlights as well as the policy in different categories. And after me, Suzanne Pridgeon, our Deputy Commissioner, will go over the budget in a little bit more detail for you all and can answer any questions as well. One thing we first and always want to start with is we recognize that we have to know what our guiding principles are and our values. And that leads us every day in the decisions that we do in policy and how we invest our dollars, and also in the programmatic work. So these are things that we've continued to say, and we also look at when we're doing things like our different orders we've recently done, as well in our policy, because we're looking for those outcomes to know, yes, we have reached the moral high ground, and we're doing things that are student-centered with every decision, and we're looking to close all of those gaps we've been talking about. And that's really the outcomes that we use these different values and goals to align our policies with. So to start with our major education investments, in the House Bill 5001 and the General Appropriations Act, there was a total of $21.5 billion invested in K-12 early learning and post-secondary career and tech, vocational rehab, blind services totaling. This is the second largest budget component in the state and one of the largest in GR, with $1.4 billion for our early learners, which is great because there's a $9.9 million increase for our VPK. So when we talk about things like being kindergarten readiness and getting to that third grade reading score that we need, we know our students want to get out and reaching that 90% reading proficient, this is that investment that we know will help that, which is the largest since 2011 and 2012. The FEFP total, which I'll go over a little bit more detail in the next two slides, is $641 million, with $137 total per student funding increase, with a $40 BSA increase as well. Talking about our post-secondary and our colleges, they have $1.3 billion, with specifically a highlight of $21 million funding increase for our public and private historically black colleges and universities, representing a historic total for those schools of $123 million. So we know these investments are going to really help us move that needle as we move forward this next year. Looking at the FEFP, it's about just under a 3% increase from last year, which you can see in this chart right here, which compares since 2019 and 2020 to this year. Specifically, if you look at the trend line for the last 10 years, you can see that there's been just over a 1,500 increase since 2011 to where we're at now. And you can see that red line is where you can see the total FEFP funding unweighted at 7,793. Suzanne also has some of these slides in hers, and she'll go down in a little bit more detail for that as well. The governor helped open us up, and he said it, 2020 has been the year of the teacher. We are so fortunate that he considers himself the education governor, and we have leadership and also stakeholders around the state that agree with us, and that we recognize in education there's a lot of components we have to do. One is the retaining and recruitment of our teachers. Two is promoting those educational choices, and also using accountability as a way that we're holding ourselves accountable. Specifically, this hits, though, on that number one. How do we recruit and retain the best teachers for our students? So we're so happy to report that through House Bill 641 and the GAA, we were able to create the teacher salary allocation within the FEFP, which is new, and it totaled to $500 million. So I'll kind of summarize this for you all on how that $500 million in policy now is going to be separated out and who's going to benefit from it. So there's two parts. 80% of that $400 million, that is for schools and charters to raise the minimum base pay for our starting teachers, but also raise any teacher that is below $47,500 up to hopefully that number. But if the district can't get to that number, then the highest salary that they can get to with their $400 million part of the funds that they get. Who does that affect and who does that benefit? That benefits our full-time classroom teachers. And that also indicates that we know from the $400 million that about 51% of current teachers, so our veteran teachers, will be getting a pay raise from just this part of the funds, which we're really excited about. As well as it's in law now that the district will not be able to go back below the number that they are getting to this year, and that they will always remain at that new base minimum pay. And as the funding could potentially continue, if the legislator will allow that, they can continue to hopefully all get our school districts to a starting pay of $47,500. The next funds are the $100 million, so 20%, and that's going to go to three different areas. One are full-time teachers who did not receive a raise from that first part. Two, full-time teachers who may have received a raise from that first part, but received less than 2% of their base salary. And instructional personnel that is specified in law. So those teachers as well are going to be able to get a pay raise. So we are so honored and thrilled that this is happening. We recognize that it's about 40% of current teachers right now make below $47,500. From what we can tell, there's going to be over 61% of current Florida teachers now, so our veteran teachers, making now $47,500 or above, which is a huge increase. So we applaud the legislature, we applaud the governor, and we are super excited to see that this is going to take us from 26 in the nation to number 5 in our minimum pay, of reaching just about an average of $46,000 each. So this is something that has been a long work in the making, and again, there's so many people to thank, including all of you to support this, and the legislature for agreeing that, hey, we're going to continue to elevate and celebrate our teachers and the profession overall. They didn't just stop there, though, this session. They continued to celebrate and elevate by doing $850,000 for our teacher liability, as well as giving $2.7 million for PD work with our teachers in the best standards. You'll hear later today from Chancellor Oliva on some updates on our best standards, and we're really looking forward to start making sure our teachers are prepared to be in the classroom and teach this great new standards that when Governor DeSantis came out and said we're getting rid of Common Core, and successfully we have now. So this is going to be the first year of a multi-year phase of how we're going to ensure that these teachers can focus on what's important, is how they make our students have the best outcomes that they can. Moving into increasing our educational options for families, It's in the data. We know parents need to understand what's best for their students. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and Florida is a leader in the nation for this. We talked about this back in April, and I'm happy to report that House Bill 7067 by Representative Sullivan did pass. And this bill builds upon last year when we created the Florida Empowerment Scholarship, which focuses on allowing low-income students to get scholarship funds. This now is able to grow to 1%. That represents 29,000 students that now possibly have additional choices that can send them to a school that works best for them, which we're thrilled about. As well as the Gardner Scholarship was funded for the wait list, fully funded, and that increases 3,600 students now are going to be able to get that scholarship. But also one of the things we keep talking about, reading and proficiency, we recognize it's so important. We have conversations about it daily, and in session we did too. We also were appropriated the $7.6 million for our reading scholarship accounts, which can go to public school students in 3rd grade who are not at reading level up all the way to 5th grade to help them get there. So we're really looking forward to utilizing these funds specifically and finding ways this year that we can make sure we're getting those students up to reading level, especially knowing the effects that unfortunately we are probably going to see with COVID and the school closures that happened this year. Expanding Florida's workforce. No news to anybody, but we all know Governor DeSantis says, hey, we want to be #1 in workforce. So do all of us. And so we're so thrilled to know that the legislature also supports this. And they have funded our #1 higher ed college system with $23 million, a tiered funding model, to really make sure that the framework for our future success that the president just spoke about can happen, and that they can continue to serve all of those students that the college system does in the best way possible. This is also the 2nd year that we've seen the historic funding of $10 million for our apprentice and pre-apprenticeship programs, the Pathway to Career and Opportunities, as well as $10 million for our computer science bonuses. There's several of the great funding components, as well as some wonderful policy that's helped with our career tech. You see it all here in the slides. I won't get into the details, but if you are interested, on the Florida Department of Education's website, at the Legislative Affairs page, we do have bill summaries for anyone who's interested for all of the 20 education-related bills that did pass. One thing I think we keep talking about in a lot of different fashions is we have to continue to increase our safety and our healthy and our learning environments. It is of the utmost importance for us at the department to make sure that our students, our educators, and our families feel confident where their students are learning. And we are so thrilled to also know that this next year we have $25 million for our mental health allocation and $5.5 million for youth mental health awareness. That this is going to be so needed this year, and we're working and looking forward to making sure that we're giving those support systems that our students need while they're in the classroom. As well as specifically, Alyssa's Law did pass in Senate Bill 70. This is named after Alyssa, who did go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and she's from New Jersey originally. New Jersey passed this law about 2 years ago, and Florida also, we passed it this year, which requires mobile panic alarm systems to be in our public school, and the legislature funded $8 million to have this happen. So we're very fortunate and thankful for that as well. Very important thing for all of us, and our personal favorite, is how we support our civic literacy. We're doing it with our CARES funding. We're also doing it in one way with the Florida Civics and Debate Initiative through the Florida Education Foundation. But we have some private funding for a multi-year program. Well, the legislature also funded just over $900,000 to show that this is something that the state also takes serious. So we're going to be able to get, in the next 3 years, every school district debate and speech clubs in middle and high school, as well as have Florida be and host one of the largest national speech and debate competitions in the nation. So this is something we're working on, and we're very thankful for that support. As well as in House Bill 171, when we talk about military families, you'll see later on the agenda, you'll be acting on appointing 2 people to a committee who's going to be working with Bob, as well as the other members, to figuring out how we can give military members credit for their training that they receive and when they're going into college and post-secondary, which is super, super wonderful. Lastly, just to close up to make you all aware, there's 3 bills that specifically has action items for the State Board of Education. That first one I just talked about, which you're already working on 171, and then 1213, which is also a really awesome one, that it also instructs that the Holocaust education standards need to be reviewed, and the Commissioner's African American History Task Force are going to be submitting a plan to you in December on ways that we can include the 1920 Okeechobee Election Day riots that are required in instruction. So we're looking forward to that in December on their report, as well as we'll have to do some rules on Senate Bill 461 when it comes to athletes and compensation. So we'll get back to you on that last one. And that's kind of it. Like I said earlier, it's up on our website, any bill summaries, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Do we have any questions for Bethany? Mr. Gibson?
Just really briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Bethany, phenomenal job. This looks like something that was legislation that would come out of over 5 years instead of just one. And I just want to, I know that the Commissioner has said this over and over, the Governor said this, we've said this, but it bears repeating again that the pay increase for teachers was so phenomenal, especially because we talked about before, it shows where our state's priority is in investing in teachers. But with the budget downturn and knowing how hard the governor had to go through and make his vetoes, and to still keep that teacher pay, I think speaks volumes about where the governor is, the legislature is, and I know our state board is when it comes to valuing our teachers. So I just want to make that comment.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I think it gets overlooked too, Member Gibson, that because it's, as you guys have talked about, even with the rollout of the emergency order, it gets phrased often as, starting teacher pay. But I think Bethany did a great job. This isn't, it affects new teachers coming into the system. Who it affects the most, almost 54, some give or take %, is veteran teachers who are in the classroom right now who are not making that salary, are automatically getting a jump right up to that amount of almost $46,000 on its way to $47,500, which puts us at number 5 in the nation. So it's almost 54% veteran teachers, starting teachers, and then the remaining veteran teachers, there's another $100 million available for them. So it was the largest teacher compensation package, existing teacher compensation package in the history of the state of Florida. So thank you for your comments.
Okay. Thank you, Bethany.
Thank you.
Now, if
This is Mike. I just wanted to thank you for the great job on the legislation. You worked hard, and it shows, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's all our honor, and it's all the team, so thank you.
okay, Ms. Pridgeon.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you in total what the department's budget will be for this upcoming year. Now that you've heard so many of our great initiatives, I'm going to ask you, as I'm walking through this presentation, that we actually start looking at the 21-22 year, as we have a couple more meetings before we actually you vote on the 21-22 budget. So hopefully this will give you a good starting point to start even thinking that forward ahead. As you can see, education is second to health and human services in receiving the largest share of the total state budget. Education, and this includes the Board of Governors, state university system, fixed capital outlay, and certainly early learning, received $26.7 billion, which is 29% of the total state share of all funds. This slide represents the general revenue distribution of funding among the state delivery sectors. Education has received the greatest share of these general revenue funds. We received $17.9 billion, or 51%. This slide shows you the comparison of 2019-20 to 2021, and our budget was increased by $669.5 million, or 3.2% overall. The largest portion of the budget for funding is for public schools and the FEFP. This funds the projected increase of approximately 32,000 additional students. The FEFP will provide $22.5 billion in state and local funding, which is an increase of $641.4 million or 2.9% over the current year. This represents an increase of $137 per student, which is $7,793 per FTE. Also, the base student allocation grows by $40 per student. It's worth mentioning is that the BSA has increased to $115 per student over 2 years, including last year's growth of $75 per student. This is the FEFP history slide that you've seen before. This reflects the $12.9 billion in state funding shown in blue and the $9.7 billion in local funding shown in red. When compared to the funding per student in 2011-12, this request represents an increase of $1,576 per student over this period of time. Early learning is funded at $1.37 billion, which is 12.1 increase over 2019-20. This is the highest BSA since 2011-12, which is $2,486, of which you recommended, the governor picked up, and it was funded. This budget also provides an additional $9.9 million for a total of more than $412 million for the VPK program. This budget also provides increased funding of $135 million to serve additional children in the school readiness program. Career and adult education is funded at $507 million. This budget maintains the $10 million for the Governor's Pathway to Career Opportunities grant program. We also continue to maintain the Carl Perkins Federal Budget Authority, of which Chancellor Mack brought this forward back in February, and it has recently been approved. It also maintains the $6.5 million for students earning industry certification at career technical centers. The Florida college system is funded at $1.27 billion. This budget invests an additional $22.8 million for a total of $1.27 in state operating funding. Also, you recommended a new tiered allocation model, of which you recommended, and it was picked up as well. $14 million was also maintained for industry certifications at Florida colleges. Also funded was $30 million in performance funding for the state colleges for the 2+2 Student Success and the Work Florida Student Success Incentive Fund. I'm way ahead of myself. Student financial aid is funded at $984.8 million, which is an increase of $62.8 million over this past year. Where there was growth in the programs as identified through an estimating conference, it was picked up as well. The Division of Vocational Rehabilitation is funded at $237.2 million. With this funding, we help to provide employment opportunities to approximately 72,000 Floridians with physical or mental disabilities around the state, including students with disabilities. The Division of Blind Services is funded at the $56.6 million. We provide opportunities to approximately 12,000 Floridians in the programs and services such as the Blind Babies and Children's Program, the Braille and Talking Book Library Services, and the Blind Vendors in the Food Service Operations. For fixed capital outlay, we received $1.5 billion. This includes maintenance funding of $169.6 million for charter schools to fund the necessary infrastructure without utilizing any funds from the districts. There's $41.3 million for the 4 special facility construction projects, which was Baker, Bradford, Gilchrist, and Levy counties. There's also $42 million for the school safety grants that are provided to school districts to improve their infrastructure, their physical security. And there's $10.7 million for construction projects at our state colleges. This slide shows the comparison amounts by budget category. which again was an increase of $669.5 million over last year. And today, under your consent items, you have the 21-22 budget guidelines that are produced to guide us in our legislative budget request that begins now. We also have estimating conferences in the upcoming weeks. They've already started that will guide our decision-making, such as the VPK, K-12, and the college's FTE estimating conferences, the Public Education Capital Outlay, and the Student Financial Aid conferences, along with the revenue estimating conferences and the impacts as well. The department's LBR is due October 15th of this year, so we'll be bringing this forward at the September board meeting and for you to vote on. So please ask us any questions. Let us know if there's any research that you need to have done before talking to the commissioner in the upcoming weeks. And we look forward to more discussion about the future. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Suzanne?
This is Mike.
Yes, sir.
I would just also add, and maybe I'm assuming that the good planning we're doing would include this, but in light of COVID and possibilities of other viruses coming down the road, I think we need to also look at the digital divide and appropriate money for distance learning, or at least contemplate it. Now, I'm assuming staff's doing that now, but I think that should be a budget item that we need to think about for next year. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oldick. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to amend the agenda, moving consent items 13, 14, and 17 to the action agenda. And we will now I'd like to recognize Kathy Hebda, Chancellor, Division of Florida Colleges, to provide an overview of the proposed BS in science education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, and members. I'm presenting both baccalaureate proposals this morning on behalf of the colleges that have submitted them due to travel concerns and costs and things with regard to the pandemic. So many of you are familiar with the first area of critical teacher shortage, which is secondary science. And Eastern Florida State College has proposed a baccalaureate degree in secondary science education. The Florida Department of Economic Opportunity projects that more than 167 annual openings are there in Brevard County alone each year for the next 8 years in secondary science positions. And you're familiar with that area being on our critical teacher shortage report every year that we provided to you, at least for the last 15 to 20 years. Many teachers in Brevard County, if they want to be a secondary science teacher, will have to leave that county and go to a university someplace else to be able to obtain this degree. So the school district superintendent, Mark Mullins, actually proposed this partnership with Eastern Florida State College. And Eastern Florida already has an Educator Preparation Institute, which provides baccalaureate degree holders with an opportunity to be certified in secondary science. But it doesn't provide them with a way for individuals who might be paraprofessionals, who have an AA degree, who are in the school system, in the school system's actual teacher preparation academies, which provide for dual enrollment for their individuals that are interested in teaching. It doesn't provide a way for them to obtain a bachelor's degree in science education. So this program will do that. So it is definitely a partnership between the school district and the college. The school district is asking the college to do it. They're excited to do it. And I will provide you with a quote both from the president and from the superintendent. The president says, this is President Jim Ritchie of Eastern Florida, "This program will help provide Brevard Public Schools with a critically needed new generation of science teachers, benefiting students in many ways, and strengthening the workforce that business and industry rely on for their success along the Space Coast." And then Superintendent Mullins has said, "While working collaboratively with Eastern Florida State College, we hope to end the teacher shortage crisis in Brevard, provide high-quality candidates statewide, and become a model for the other K-12 public school systems and post-secondary education institutions. Therefore, it is without reservation that I provide my absolute support and strongly encourage you to give them your highest consideration. The college is able to do this program without any additional resources because they have the terminally degreed science faculty already on staff, and they have education faculty on staff from the EPI, and they'll have letters of support from local institutions and the University of Central Florida, which has an elementary education degree locally provided on Eastern Florida's campus. And that's the degree, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do you have any questions, members, before we get a motion? Okay, can we get a motion to approve the Bachelor of Science?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Chancellor Hebda, your next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next degree proposal, baccalaureate degree proposal is Miami-Dade College, and it's a Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity. At this point in time, I would like to remind the board, because we don't bring all of our college programs to the State Board of Education for approval, we only bring the baccalaureate programs to the board for approval. So many times it's hard to remember exactly what are all the great things happening in the college system right now with our over 729,000 students that are enrolled. 44% of those students, as you heard President Pickens talk about, are enrolled in AA programs. The 2+2 program in Florida is strong. And so 44% of students are enrolled in those, and 14% are enrolled in associate in science programs. Those are workforce programs. Those are many times terminal degrees for many of the workforce positions that are out there in engineering technology and manufacturing, and certainly many of our nursing and other healthcare programs. 16% are also enrolled in those short-term college credit certificate programs that are part of the rapid credentialing program that the governor has initiated through his CARES dollars. So we have a lot of students that are participating in those credentials, and those credentials actually stack into AS degrees. And now we have an AS program at Miami-Dade College in cybersecurity that will now lead to their proposal for a baccalaureate degree in cybersecurity. I will mention that this college, similar to the program at Brevard, the college only needs to provide a few resources, about $57,000 worth of resources for the first year, and after that the program is self-sustaining because they have the faculty on staff right now in cybersecurity because of the AS programs and of all the certificate programs they offer in cybersecurity. And this is going to fill a really particular need that business and industry have. There are about 800,000 openings just in Miami-Dade alone in cybersecurity every year. The other post-secondary institutions and universities produce about 250 of those. And so this baccalaureate level between the certificate and AS level and onto the higher education level that FIU and others would provide, it's a very, very necessary area in cybersecurity at this very next level of training. And that's what the college will provide with these degrees. And so I should quote President Montoya on his behalf, since I'm presenting this for him. And he says, Miami-Dade College is grateful to the State Board of Education for the opportunity to offer a baccalaureate degree in cybersecurity that will permit graduates to obtain highly paid jobs and satisfy the needs of business and industry in Florida. This degree comes with numerous letters of support from local businesses in cybersecurity and also with the Cybersecurity Center in the University of West Florida, as well as the local university, FIU. And that's the degree.
Do we have any questions for Kathy on this one? All right, can I get a motion to approve the Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, since Chancellor Oliva is the next one to come up, I think we need to take a quick break before he does. So if you could be back here in 10 minutes.
You are watching the Florida Channel, connecting Florida.
Calhoun County was named after John C. Calhoun, who was a senator from South Carolina. He served with General Andrew Jackson and later was the vice president to Quincy Adams and then Andrew Jackson. He served as Secretary of State, Secretary of War, then ran for vice president and was elected. Later, after the Peggy Eaton affair, which was termed in the media as the Petticoat affair, he and his wife were asked to leave the White House, as was the rest of the cabinet, and they returned to South Carolina. He later was elected to Congress and served in Congress for South Carolina. Interestingly enough, his daughter married Thomas Clemson, and the Calhoun estate began what is now Clemson University. Today, Calhoun County is much smaller than the way it started. Initially, Calhoun County encompassed what is now Gulf County as well. Later, it was carved out to just cover the territory that it covers today. We work well with our neighbors. We're proud to be a part of Northwest Florida. We're very regional in our attempts, and we have lots of good roots here and good county heritage, and we're proud to be from Calhoun County.
Miss a meeting? We've got it all at thefloridachannel.org. Our video library provides access to more than 10,000 state government hearings and meetings, and it's growing, with more than 3,000 hours of original programming added each year. From meetings of the governor and cabinet, legislative hearings and floor sessions, to coverage of the Florida Supreme Court, along with news conferences and state agency meetings outside the state capitol. We've got it all at thefloridachannel.org.
The film industry, like many others, took an economic nosedive in March when the pandemic put a pause on productions in the state. One of the first feature films scheduled to come back is The Highwaymen, based on the story of 26 African-American landscape artists in Florida from the 1950s.
The art itself is beautiful, but when you know the story behind it and you know what went behind that painting to just make it and sell it, I mean, it almost adds this whole other dimension to it that turns it into, makes it very magical.
The Highwaymen is in pre-production and is supposed to start filming in Central Florida towards the end of summer. But as the worldwide health crisis continues, many sets will have measures in place to mitigate possible coronavirus outbreaks. For movie makers, being creative is part of the job, and they'll have to use that skill to reduce the risk. For example, filming a scene that calls for 150 people calls for some movie magic.
We're going to do maybe 20 people, space them apart, lock the camera off, redress them, move them around in different seats, do it 6 or 7 times, and then build the shot together to where we have 150 people, but you can't tell that we didn't originally, right?
A variety of film organizations around the globe have created their own healthy guidelines for crews to follow on set. Film Florida, a nonprofit that advocates for the industry, published their own in May. And while there's no real enforcement, the state's Office of Film and Entertainment is encouraging production companies to follow the recommendations.
Our office has implemented new items in our online production directory. We have added under crew health and safety COVID-19 compliance officer, and under support services, under health and safety, we've added personal protective equipment and cleaning and disinfectants and sanitation solutions.
During a meeting of the Film Office's Advisory Council, the film commissioner also shared another piece of news. Cast and crews from the tri-state area won't have to enter a mandatory 2-week quarantine if they're here for a production. An order from Governor DeSantis meant to quell the number of cases coming from high-risk states. The virus has also challenged the film industry in other ways, with temporary furloughs for some local film offices, postponed festivals, and a struggle in how to teach aspiring filmmakers in the classroom.
We're all facing the same challenges in terms of how to get equipment to the kids, how they can make their films still how we can teach, production in the classroom virtually.
The producers of The Highwaymen are hoping their movie, a film about Black entrepreneurs surviving the Jim Crow South culture, will be a silver lining that inspires moviegoers experiencing the pitfalls of this monumental year.
We can all look at this in our own lives and say, yeah, I've struggled. Maybe not as much as these guys have, because they struggled a lot in a time period that was against them, right? And they were able to succeed and thrive.
For the Florida Channel, I'm Josie Barroso.
You are watching the Florida Channel, a public service made possible by the Florida Legislature, WFSU-TV, and Florida State University.
If you like the Florida Channel, now like the Florida Channel on Facebook.
Everybody could take your seats and let's get back going here. I'd like to call Chancellor Oliva, Division of Public Schools, to provide an overview of the next 3 items.
Thank you, Chair Tuck, Commissioner Corcoran, members of the board, for allowing me to provide an update on our schools that are in turnaround. And if it's okay with you, Chair Tuck, there's 3 distinct items, and it's listed on our agenda as action items 8, 9, and 10. I'd like to do just an overview of where we are with schools that were in turnaround and share some updates and information, and then the board can go back and take the appropriate action for each item if that's the pleasure of the board.
That's fine.
So if everybody remembers back in March when we asked districts to kind of pivot on the way we knew teaching and learning here throughout the state and develop and implement instructional continuity plans and do distance learning, which we were hoping at the time was just going to be for a few weeks, and we had a strong desire to get our students back in campuses and close out the school year in our historic fashion. Well, as we know, we weren't able to do that, and we had to make some tough decisions along the way. Well, with that, Commissioner Corcoran and his leadership, the state decided to sunset the accountability program, which would have required the students to come in and take standardized assessments, and we use those assessments to be part of the components that make up the school grades, which was the right decision to make at that time. Well, the state board closely monitors schools that are in turnaround, and these are schools that have received D's or F graded schools for consecutive years, and they have left the district managed turnaround component and are entering into other options. Well, when we have plans that we bring to the state board around approving those options, many of them are in relation to the partnerships they develop with external operators. And since we did not have school grades, we often get that question, well, what happens to schools that are in turnaround? So in the absence of grades, we want to make sure that we continue the supports that we've approved and put in place for some of our most fragile schools and some of our most fragile learners and families to make sure that we can maintain high learning opportunities for these students until we do get empirical evidence or data that supports that these schools should be exited from the turnaround program. So I wanted to give that background in regard to these 3 options, because what we're going to be moving forward is the continuation of our previously approved state board plans that the state board has taken action on earlier throughout the last school year. And we're going to look at some changes to some of these plans as we move forward along the way. So if you remember, historically, when the state board approves a plan, we ask the superintendent to provide an overview of the plan and bring their external operator with them and present the plan collaboratively so that we can see the partnership that's been developed. Since we are continuing with the plans that have already been approved, the districts have given us permission to go ahead and present their plans and updates on their behalf. I will caveat that since we're in Hillsborough, we thought it would be a good idea that Superintendent Davis do provide an overview of the work that they're doing in Hillsborough, and we're really excited about some of the early initiatives that he's taken already in place in his short tenure. So these are going to go specifically related by action item, and the first action item is to consider the closure for the turnaround plan in Duval for the Northwestern Middle School. Many of you are familiar with this school. In fact, this was a school that we had recommended to the state board for closure last school year, which would have been the 1920 school year. And fortunately, Commissioner Corcoran and Superintendent Green at that time said, well, instead of going to full closure, we want to do a year of transition. And the students that would have been transferring into that school or enrolling in that school in 6th grade went to neighboring schools, and then we put some strong supports in place for the remaining students. Parents had the opportunity to choice out of the school, and then we provided high quality interventions for the students that remain in 7th and 8th grade. Well, now that that school year is complete, we want to move forward with the recommended plan. That's been about a 2 or 3 year transition to permanently close that school, and the students that would have been zoned in that school will attend 2 neighboring middle schools that have capacity and that do have school grades of a C. And part of this turnaround plan is to approve the closure, but then we will also monitor those students and and make sure that they're getting access to high-quality educators, high-quality leaders, and high-quality instruction, and we'll be collecting progress monitoring data on those students. Action item 9 revolves around the schools with external operators, specifically for 1 in Volusia County and 4 in Hillsborough County. And the reason this is a separate request is that for Volusia County, they have Palm Terrace Elementary School. They're requesting to change external operators. They previously had Learning Sciences International, and they are going to request that this school year, going into their turnaround plan, uses TNTP, which is a new teacher project, and we have reviewed those plans and we are in support of that recommendation. For these 4 schools in Hillsborough, and Superintendent Davis is going to talk a little bit more about those plans, they are also requesting to change external operators. They previously had Phelan as their external operator. We may not have been seeing the progress that we had desired under their support, and they have decided to bring in a different external operator, which was MGT. And we have seen success with MGT throughout the state and other districts. And in fact, they're already in some schools in Hillsborough, so it was a natural transition for them to bring on this external operator as well. The last action item of the 3, action item 10, is basically to extend all of the other turnaround plans as written with the external operator that they have in place. I will caveat that with some of these plans that we've seen, even with Hillsborough, and some of the plans that we see here, is that some districts are changing their school principals, which is something that we do monitor around the turnaround plans, because the state board has in rule that these schools should be led by somebody that has previous experience in turnaround. And when a school district decides to change leadership, they have a principal verification form that they submit to us, and we ask questions and make sure that these students have access to high quality leaders. For every single plan that we are recommending today, all of the necessary documentation was submitted and reviewed by our school improvement team, and we will be recommending that we approve these action items when it's appropriate. So with that, unless there's any specific questions from the board around these plans, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Davis, who'll give a brief update on what they're doing in Hillsborough, because I know we've had a lot of discussions around the turnaround efforts in Hillsborough and the number of schools that are in that program.
Thank you, Chancellor Oliva. Appreciate you always being accessible to superintendents and me as well. I know I call you many times a week, but he always answers the phone and is a partner in work. I also want to take the time to thank Sherry Thompson. Thank you so very much for what you do and being here today. We appreciate you, helping us with ensuring that we have safety along the way. Overall today, in Hillsborough County, one thing I wanted to talk about is just the current status of where we are. We know that there's an opportunity for us to improve the academic status overall from a school's perspective. I want to discuss the vision that we have for our continuous improvement model, how we will continue to lead and do it with grace and work alongside teachers to help them be successful and build their capacity along with leaders, and then highlight reorganization and the theory of action that will drive our work in Hillsborough as we drive the 2021 school year, and discuss the redevelopment and re-imaging of the transformational network, which was previously named as our achievement schools. So overall, if you look at by the numbers, we are the 7th largest school district in the nation. We have over 250 schools, and in those schools we have nearly 14,000 teachers, 25,000 employees, and over 220,000 students within our organization. This is a very large organization, and when you look at the overall makeups in the grade, we have historically, if you look at what we've done since what the achievement status that we've accomplished since 14-15, and look at the longitudinal data, you will see that we are starting to make a staircase approach back to where we were in 14-15. If you look at us overall analytically, 51% of our schools are rated C's, D's, and F's, and which I will tell you openly is unacceptable. This is not to a point where it's a reflection of our teachers. They are working hard every single day. And we have to leverage and publicize and acknowledge their hard work and duplicate best practices within our organization. And overall, you see that we have a graduation rate of 85.8, which is to continue to see an upward movement in this 5-year trajectory. But overall, this is a deeper look of our accountability. We're seeing that we have 27 Ds and 7 Fs. We know that this is unacceptable. And you look at how you address and unpack all of these schools, we see the majority of our schools that are underperforming are those in elementary. And we spoke earlier about, the Chancellor spoke earlier about, and Joe Pickens spoke earlier about how early education truly matters. And we've got to start, as early as we can to make sure that we're gaining access to children in 3-year-old and 4-year-old programs so we can have a pipeline of stability and expose them to high-level curriculum so they're able to compete intellectually, socially, emotionally along the way. The biggest thing you need to understand is that when we talk about the unhealthiness of where we are academically and instructionally, of the 250 plus schools, 111 declined academically and instructionally as related to the accountability system in the state of Florida. And that means that we have work to do. So coming in, how do we accelerate Hillsborough? What will be our stance to make certain that we are not in front of you again talking about our schools in order to take proactive stance? The biggest thing we have to do is have a relentless pursuit of high-quality instructional experiences every single day for every one of our children. We've got to make certain that we have high expectations and make certain the mindsets of every one of our educators, the mindsets of every one of our children and our administrators are there to make certain we are exposing children to continuous, rigorous content in every classroom, every day for every student. And in addition, we've got to make sure everything that we align and that we adopt from a curriculum standpoint is not a subjective, but it's research-based and proven in the state of Florida and aligns to the spirit of our standards, along with making certain that our students are not compliantly engaged, but actively engaged every single day. We have got to make certain as leaders and as teachers that our students are not only academically engaged, but they demonstrate understanding. They're exposed to rigorous content and that they truly understand and can articulate spiral curriculum and assignments of how, of essential vocabularies and connectivity to the learning process so that they can grow every single day within our classrooms. And also we've got to make certain we have grade level appropriate content in every classroom, regardless of where our learners' readiness levels may be. And we've got to move forward to have strategic small group practices that allow us to use interventionists and leverage content of our teachers along with time on task to help our students with the remediations of skills and standards along the way that exposes them to grade level curriculum. So how are we going to create a world-class education in Hillsborough where we're going to make certain that we have a fluent relationship with the board, to be transparent about our work, to create accountable measures, to make certain that we address the equity needs in our schools and be unapologetic about how we serve a school and provide supports in a differentiated manner, and to make certain that we adopt curriculums from Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 that allows us to implement supplementary supports and materials to be able to address the growing needs of our students based on their demographics, based on their circumstance, based on their intellectual readiness level, in order to tier continuous improvements within our school and make sure that we have a thriving culture. One thing I've had a chance to do over the last 2 weeks is meet with a cohort of teachers, and they are ready to educate our children to work hard, but openly they have continuously fears about what the classrooms may look like along the way. And also making certain that we're very intentional about our strategic mapping. How are we leveraging partners, not just to write the check, but be there to be mentors, to be life coaches, and help our children compete and create pathways, internships along the way to allow them to be exposed to possibilities they have never been led to before, and making certain that we address the overall fiscal health and energy within our work, and making certain that we have mental health, safety, and security as one of our greatest priority. And we've done a lot of things in the last 4 months. We've reorganized our work. We have had 250 plus independent contractors. We were not centralized related to our curriculum. We have brought that back to the central district office level to adopt Tier 1, Tier 2 and curriculums and provide clear expectations and vision for our way of work. We have removed the K-12 continuum of serving students from of serving schools and providing supports from regional superintendents, and now we have gone to grade band experts from elementary school, middle school, and high school along the way. And we've done nationwide searches for principals that we've hired, and we've made 39 changes. And I don't say that in a bragging manner. I say that there was definitely a need based on longitudinal analytics to be able to hire and recruit the best and the brightest to Hillsborough County. And then we're also making certain that we are redesigning our work from achievement school model and transition into the transformation network, which will be led by a leader in regional superintendents with a chief of transformation, which will be Shay McCrae, that has a proven track record for improving student learning and outcomes for children, along with Star Connor and Rachel O'Day to be able to help with that process. So where we are from turnaround, we know that the state management schools have decreased by 74% since 2016. We're moving from 31 schools to 8 schools. We understand that 8 is unacceptable, but we are working diligently to make certain that we have the right teachers, they have the right leaders, the right support staff along the way, and we're providing teachers and inspiring them with the core content in curriculum and professional development, how to gain access to children and maximize moments of learning. We've also hired a new external operator to 4 of our schools, and 100% of our schools have leaders in our schools that have proven track records to move the needle related to student performance. And for the first time in a while, we have 100% of our schools in this platform that have no teachers who are needs improvement or unsatisfactory for our children. So looking at the analytical trend, we know that we have 8 schools that are under this umbrella that will get great concentration. The Achievement Network will report directly to the superintendent, so we have hands-on movement. As you can see through this slide, we have a number of new leaders that would be taking place and leading the work to help us and improve our outcomes and further support and work with teachers along the way. But here we see that there's a number of schools that aren't healthy. And we know that we have work to do, but we will be intentional along the way. So last year, we've had this model in 2018-19, the last time we received accountability measures, we had the achievement model in Hillsborough County. This was 50 schools that were ranged from C's to D's and F's. And of these schools, they really focused on building the capacity of leaders, and that was via consultants that we hired from the outside looking in. They focus on individual school priorities based on curriculum. So each individual school got a chance to select what the curriculum they thought was best for their learners. And at the same time, they worked on professional development coaches that were non-content specific, but they're to really help with the pedagogy side. What the Transformational Network brings is a new light and a bit of fresh air and energy to this work. We've drilled down to put and focus on our D&F schools, not that we will not focus on C schools that are on that bubble or that yo-yo impact. We will focus on strong instructional capacity practices that help build the intellectual understanding of content with our teachers and support staff. We've established clear instructional frameworks for every one of our core contents, and then we will design new instructional coaches that are experts in the area of literacy, mathematics, science, and social studies in order to go in and drive PLCs, work alongside developing high-quality lessons, doing coaching cycles and lesson studies in order to help our children. And we relaunched and reimagined the family community engagement centers that will truly be impactful within our communities of need. And we will have a dedicated data strategist that will allow us to focus on every matrix from the progress monitoring loop in order to move forward and keep the ball in the prize of moving and helping our children. We're going to go to the next slide. Thank you, sir. One of the next questions we have is where are we going from an external operator? And historically in Hillsborough County, since 2018, we've had 2 external operators. And in this side, since 2018, we had Felon Leadership Academies. They are Indiana-based, nonprofit organization that is nationally known for working through schools within who need turnaround assistance. And if you look at their overall impact in Hillsborough County since 2017, 2020, when you're looking at the analytics, % of the schools that they service within our community decreased. And for us, it's not okay to copy and paste budgets. It's not okay to copy and paste external operators. There has to be accountability and crucial conversations to have. Therefore, you look on the other side, since 2019, we've had MGT, and they are a Florida-based program founded in 1974. And if you look at their data sets, they haven't had a chance to see the improvements of what 1920 would have brought, but we do have formative data that indicates that would have moved the majority of the schools that they have served in order to indicate their overall practice has been working to help our school district. So as move forward in the 2021 school year, we have elected to remove failing from a partnership with our school district. We will then go to one external provider to be able to work in concert every single day, and it's just easier practice. But if you look at the overall offerings in the comparison analysis, you see that failing, they had an academic officer that was there to support us, but they had limited touch points for our schools. They also had directors that had only remote access. They were not on the ground to help our students and to help our teachers. They had regional directors that were shared by multiple schools, and they had instructional specialists that were one per school. So they had to know reading, math, science, social studies in order to identify best practices. And they weren't very content specific in their work. And then also they had coaching cycle model that provided daily feedback to teachers for the instructional practice. But if you look at MGT, it's more robust opportunity. The first thing is they're local. We have accessibility 100% of the time, 24/7. And during this pandemic, they were boots on the ground to help our children as we served 5.5 million meals. We had backpack drives to be able to help our children, and they were there alongside of us. And what they bring, they have a vice president that was at every one of our monthly meetings to help us through problem solving. They have availability to transformational specialists on the ground to help with real-time teaching and real-time coaching. They have instructional supports that are context specific that help us provide learning through small group instructional practices. And along the way, they have analytical supports that provide sophisticated dashboards for us to have targeted solutions to help our teachers differentiate the instructional process and scaffold along the way. So overall, we are excited about this partnership. It gives us one external operator to deal with, one that really has a comprehensive plan and ready to move forward. So where are we now? Our job right now is to make certain we're very clear about the core concepts and curriculum that we adopt, and to make sure the frameworks that we have are implemented in our turnaround schools. We also need to make certain that we protect the integrity by deploying resources at the district level and being content specific versus being global. And then we'll have a tiered approach of how we support schools based on percentage of new teachers, based on academics, based on attendance behaviors, and you triangulate all those early warning indicators to make informed decisions, along with being strategic alignment with working with the Bureau of School Improvement in order to refine our efforts. So I know that's a lot, but we have a lot of work to do, and time is our enemy, but we're going to work diligently every single day on behalf of children. And as I said, in Hillsborough, we have great teachers, and we're here to support them along the way. And I can tell you and vow to you, and this leadership's been here for 4 months, we will not be in front of you again with the same number of schools that are underperforming.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
I actually wanted to go back to the trend analysis on the turnaround schools.
Yes, ma'am.
I was curious, for the 4 schools that have new principals, do we know how many times they've had a new principal in the last 2 to 3 years?
Yes, ma'am. We didn't have none of our schools have had a principal, 3 principals in 3 years. They have been somewhat consistent, and not to be disrespectful, but there hasn't been a lot of changes in Hillsborough related to leadership. So, me coming in, my job is to do all the analysis to determine longitudinal data, cultural data, impact data to see if leaders are actually truly being effective. And in these particular 4 schools that we've made changes for, it's just best for our kids. And I went out and recruited individuals that have moved schools from D's to B's, from F's to A's, and that have been regional superintendents in our county and other counties throughout the state, to bring them to be able to do some sophisticated work for children. So of the 4 new principals in this leadership, they are proven, they have a track record, they understand how to build relationships, culture, to gain access to the community, but they know how to do and support teachers and do great work along the way every single day.
Do we have any other questions? Mr. Gibson?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Hold on just a second. Let me get Mr. Gibson. I'll be right back to you, Mr. Grady.
I think it's important to note, I think Jacob touched on this a little bit, that even though we suspended school grades because of COVID, which is a common sense approach, accountability in the state of Florida has not been suspended. And that's even more important, I think, right now as we are talking about all the different obstacles to overcome as far as reopening. Superintendent, can you tell me a little bit about MGT specifically? How have they pivoted? How are they helping you to make sure that these students don't fall behind, especially given this new environment we're in?
Well, the biggest thing is that they, when we hit this pandemic, they were on the ground immediately. We were we were starving how to address the digital divide. And while we were able to give out 40,000 laptops to our learners and put out, thousands of hotspots with the assistance of HEF, they were alongside of us because we knew that, while some of our students had the hardware, they didn't have the connectivity through the internet service providers. So they stepped up to help us draft and write lessons related to having pencil and paper lessons for our children to be successful. So not only creating lessons, but being able to drop those packets off to our students, to be able to continue to have Zoom meetings with our teachers to help them to how to coach students, how to connect with learners during this trying time. And they've been awesome. And to this day, they have taken on the leadership to take on all of our schools. They've been on the ground to help us to be very thoughtful about curriculums we select, what supplemental materials we adopt, how we support teachers, what professional learning should look like, and very invested about, what leaders come along the way to help us be successful. So they've been a great think partner along this work and along the way, and I look forward to this striving relationship.
Mr. Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent Davis. I'd like to applaud the many changes you have made in what I understand is a 4-month tenure, and I think the energy is terrific. I love to see it. I'm particularly pleased with the principal search you described, searching for those leaders on a nationwide basis to bring to what is the 7th largest district in the country is very, very important. You may know from your prior position, I believe in St. John's, that our board has been very concerned about leadership and principals in the schools. And since you are now looking anew at all things in Hillsborough, I'm wondering whether you think with the right leadership in the schools and with great principals in those schools and your leadership, is there any need for external operators going forward?
Right now for this year, the answer is yes. But I can tell you, as we get to a point, leadership matters. And it surely does, but my job is to put them out of business. And, we're going to do the best that we can to be able to help children along the way. And, we didn't only just hire first-round draft pick regional superintendents, a new executive team, along with great leaders, but we hired the right APs that align with the needs of the differentiated needs of the school, whether it's, the literacy component, making certain we have someone to help us through science with hands-on inquiry-based learning. So, we did a really good job not only recruiting leaders but teachers as well. So as we see and move the transition to seeing that there's 8 schools on this list, we do believe that of the 8 schools, we're going to do everything we can to eliminate every one of them, to be able to come back in front of you today to tell you that we have had concentrated laser-like focus in Hillsborough County. We're not going to be all over the map. We're not going to do 10 things okay. We're going to do 3 things right. And that's make certain that we have grade level appropriate content in front of our teachers, to make certain that we differentiate instruction every single day and create the safest place for every one of our students and every one of our employees along the way during this pandemic.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick follow-up or two on that. Are you concerned, Superintendent, about the subsidiary that MGT has formed to work in Hillsborough as opposed to dealing directly with the parent? And particularly, does that create any potential accountability issues for you?
No, sir, not for me at this time. No, sir.
Are you aware of that?
Can you define in detail what you're asking?
Well, I don't need to take the time of the entire group and the board, but perhaps you could just check that out. I was a little concerned in looking through. It appears that MGT has formed a subsidiary to work in Hillsborough, and I think that you sound like you're very experienced with that organization, and obviously they've been in Florida for some time. And I'm just wondering why we wouldn't, or you wouldn't, contract directly with the parent and hold the parent accountable for your very high expectations.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time understanding and hearing you through the voice concern. So I don't know if someone can. You may be closer to the chair. May be closer.
I understand. I can follow up with
Okay,
you,
thank you,
Addison.
sir.
We can look into that. And
Okay, yeah. I mean, we're
get back to you.
looking anyway. I can tell you this through all my analytics and all my reviews. There's two providers in the state of Florida that we have looked at that have proven competence in the work: LSI and MGT. And those are the two individuals that we looked at diligently to figure out how we can move forward. And I've seen and done a lot of research related to the overall impact of both of them. And I can tell you, I think that MGT could do the same, the same level of work that the LSI can do. But I think there's a major differentiation in the costability for that. And we just got to be smart and be fiscally responsible and find the best support that we can. So I look forward to following up with that, Commissioner, to better understand. I couldn't hear all of the question, but look forward to looking into any situation that may be apprised and that we can work better through it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions for Superintendent Davis? All right, we're going to go to action item number 8 first. We'll vote on all of them separately. Do members have any questions on the turnaround option plan for the school districts in Duval County? Hearing none. Do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute. Commissioner, do you have a recommendation?
Recommend adopting it.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation on Duval County. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, review the turnaround option plans, annual external operator contracts for school districts of Hillsborough and Volusia County.
Recommend adoption.
The Commissioner's recommended adoption. Is there any questions?
None.
Can I get a motion to approve the Commissioner's recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we're going to need a review of annual external operator contracts for school districts Duval, Escambia, Hillsborough, Marion, Pinellas, and Polk counties. Commissioner, do you have a recommendation?
Recommend adoption.
All right, we got a recommended adoption from the Commissioner. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Now I'd like to recognize Dr. Dre, Executive Director, Office of Independent Education and Parental Choice, for an overview of the next item.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
The action item I'll be presenting this morning is the recommendation for Matter Academy to be designated as a HOPE operator. In 2017, the Florida legislature established the Schools of Hope program, whose primary purpose was to recruit high-impact charter school networks to serve our lowest performing areas academically in Florida and support their operations and growth throughout the state. Following this passage of law, the state board adopted a rule that determined how the department will review an application for HOPE operator status from eligible charter school networks. To date, the state board has accepted applications from and granted HOPE operator status to 4 separate organizations: Idea Public Schools, KIP, Somerset Academy in Jefferson County, and Democracy Prep Public Schools. Of those 4, there are 2 that currently have schools that are operating, and then Idea also has some plans in place to start over the next couple of years. Matter Academy is our newest applicant. It was recently awarded a charter school program grant from the U.S. Department of Education for the purpose of expanding their high-quality offerings. This is one of the criteria for HOPE operator status. A prospective applicant must also demonstrate that it has a record of serving students in low-income families. Matter Academy clearly meets this criteria, as it operates 28 public charter schools in Florida and serves over 17,000 students ranging from grades K through 12. Across all of those schools, the average rate of students on free or reduced price lunch is 76%. Matter is one of the state's highest performing charter school networks, and it is the recommendation that the state board grant it Hope Operator status. This will authorize Matter to enter into a performance-based agreement with the school district to establish, open, and operate one or more public charter schools to serve students from persistently low-performing district schools or in a Florida Opportunity Zone. We have a representative with us today from Matter Academy, Mr. Fernando Barroso, who is available to answer more detailed questions should you request.
Any questions from the board? Can I get them up? Yes, ma'am.
You said there's a representative here from Matter Academy?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would just love to hear a little more about where you might, if approved, focus your next effort. Like where are you looking to establish Hope Schools?
Good morning, everyone. How are you?
I'm well.
My name is Fernando Barroso, and I'm the Central Florida Director of Operations for Academica, and I'm here on behalf of the Matter Academy Board, the President, Mr. Blanche, its Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Marty. I also brought with me two principals from Matter Brighton Lakes and Matter Palms Academy here in Osceola County. In regards to your question, I really don't know exactly what particular districts or area. I know that there will be schools in Central Florida. There's need all over the state. The grant that we received is a pretty sizable one, but I can't really give you specifics on which districts or exact site locations at the moment.
All right, have you talked to Superintendent Davis?
I personally have not. I've been working on other things with operations and, school starting.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Gibson?
I just want to note that, and I think you did a great job explaining that when an application like this comes before the board, it's been vetted. There's specific criteria within statute and within our rule that, number one, they've operated 3 or more K-12 public charter schools and they have a record of serving students from low-income families, and then there's other evidence as well. So I think that's important to know that we don't just let anybody become the Hope School operator, but there's specific criteria, and I applaud you guys for meeting those standards.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Matter's founding was with Title I and underprivileged demographics, so I appreciate that comment.
Any other questions? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the application for Hope Operator designation for Matter Academy?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to bring back Chancellor Oliva to provide an overview of the next two items.
Thank you, Chair Tuck, Commissioner Corcoran, members of the board. It's great to be back in front of you today to provide an update on where we are with the adoption and implementation of Florida standards. We formally took some action on that. We have our benchmarks for excellent student thinking. And if you remember, we were tasked early on in Governor DeSantis's tenure with Executive Order 1932 to do a full review and rewrite of our English language arts and mathematics standards. So we've been coming before the board to give updates on the timeline and process for how we're going to transition this hard work into our classrooms, and that's why I'm here before you today. So early in the adoption process, we established a timeline that we are sticking to, and we know that when we go through the process of writing and developing new standards and getting aligned materials and aligned assessments, that doesn't happen overnight, and it's a multi-year phased process. So you can see that this work is still continuing, and is moving forward for the 2020-21 school year. And in that bubble, you'll see for instructional materials and adoption process, it starts with getting new materials aligned to our English language arts standards K-12. So also highlighted in 2020-21 is starting to do professional development, which our teams are already doing, and we're moving forward with the instructional materials timeline. That's going to set us up to continue the instructional materials adoption next school year in 21-22 with math, and leading up to the culmination of rewriting and implementing new assessments in the 22-23 school year. So if you remember early on in February, we formally adopted our new English language arts and math standards, our benchmarks for excellent student thinking. We are coming back in the next item, right after this item, is to do some updates to those standards, and I'll be able to share that in our timeline moving forward. But after we've adopted standards, then we adopt courses, and we were able to take that to the state board with the majority of our English language arts and math classes. There's still a few courses that will be coming back to you, so that those standards fit into our courses, and we'll update that in our course code directory. And then with that, we want to teach our teachers and provide professional development on the implementation of those standards and get everything aligned between curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We call that CIA. The standards set the expectations of what we want students to know and learn at each grade level by subject, and then we turn over those expectations to our school districts to help inform instruction and adopt and develop localized curriculum that meets their students' needs. But then we also have our statewide assessment and accountability. So we were very blessed throughout the legislative process, and we heard from Ms. Swanson earlier, but our legislative budget request for professional development was approved and was appropriated, and we're beginning to move forward with the training of teachers on what do these new expectations mean for English language arts and math. Most of that is virtual right now. In fact, our first official live virtual event starts next week, so we're really excited to do that. And then we're going to update all of the master lessons that our teachers create throughout the state into our CPOMS inventory, which is the hub of information that teachers and leaders go to for supporting those grade level expectations, like we heard Superintendent Davis say is one of his primary goals, to see grade level instruction in every classroom. So moving forward with today's update, what we're asking the board to do is update the rules so that we can have our formal instructional materials adoption process. And what we're asking this board to take action on is to delete the old language that referenced in English language arts to Florida standards and implement the new language on our benchmarks for excellent student thinking. And it just does our timeline a little bit for when materials would be submitted to the department, and also clearly sets out those expectations we want from publishers to ensure that these materials are aligned to our standards. We want a Florida-created product to support the work that our Florida educators did in Florida to set these Florida expectations and standards, and then we'll be able to move that forward. And then another little update on there that I wanted to let the board know is our teams are still working. In fact, they're having meetings this week on what's called achievement level descriptors as we're moving forward with the writing of new assessments. So we're going to have new standards, new primary instructional tools, and new assessments that will be for our Florida students and help with the transition and implementation timeline.
Thank you, Chancellor Oliva. Is there any questions from the board? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. It's not so much a question as, I guess it is a question. I'm interested to hear more about any concerns that you might have gotten from the forums in which you're working to finalize our standards as it relates to potential delays due to having to shift how you roll this out, because you won't have all of the opportunities for physical engagement and face-to-face training for the teachers. Do they have confidence that they're going to get the level of instruction that is necessary for them to carry it forward on the schedule we projected?
I think that's an excellent question. So we're actually pretty blessed to have a partnership with a regional comprehensive support center here in the state of Florida, and that was pretty much our number one goal, that we've asked some outside agencies to support the work that our our department folks are engaged in developing and implementing these new standards in professional development with fidelity. And part of that partnership is going to be support from a group called NERN. And you have to forgive me, I cannot exactly remember what NERN stands for, but they're experts in what's called implementation science. There is research and models on when you do professional development and set calendars and expectations, and science and evidence on what does high quality professional development learning look like as you develop and implement professional learning. And a part of our collaborative partnership is going to include formal training in implementation science so we can move forward with fidelity. So while some of the trainings we had wanted to do face-to-face, we had to learn to pivot as well into a different environment. The train-the-trainer model that we follow historically with implementation is moving forward. And beginning as early as next week, school districts are sending their experts that are going to get fully immersed. This is I think it's 3 or 5 days of full days of training on ELA and math expectations so that they can become localized and regionalized trainers. And then part of Commissioner Corcoran's vision around supporting our early literacy initiatives and the CARES Act funding, we were able to carve some dollars out to support this work as well. So we did have to adjust and we had to pivot a little bit, but we are still heavily invested in making sure that we deliver a high quality product.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board? All right, can I get a motion to approve amendment to the Rule 6A-7.0710, instructional materials?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're going to go to item number 13 from the consent agenda since we pulled it to the action agenda. Approval of amendment to Rule 6A-1.09422, statewide standardized assessment program requirements. Mr. Oliva.
Sure. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about what this request is. And one of the things that's outlined in Florida statute and part of our expectations for meeting graduation requirements is that our students demonstrate mastery or a certain level of proficiency in English language arts and in mathematics in order to earn a high school diploma. This has been in place for several decades in the state, and part of that is making sure we can have different pathways. Well, with the impact of COVID and the sunset of assessments, Commissioner Corcoran did give waiver authority for students that were expected to graduate in the spring of 20, the waiver of certain graduation requirements in regard to assessments to hold students harmless. It was the right decision, and it's not the students' fault that we were not able to administer some assessments, and that was going to maybe potentially hold them back. So moving forward, we had a lot of students that didn't take the math graduation requirement, which is algebra right now in the state of Florida. And outlined in statute and rule is that we have to have a math assessment that students must pass, or they can earn a concordant score, and that's what the state board looks like at different opportunities in setting those levels of expectations that we would want to see. Currently in place, we have SAT and ACT as an opportunity for students that may not meet success, particularly say in Algebra 1, but can get a certain score on the ACT or SAT that will satisfy that exit criteria for demonstrating mastery and competencies in mathematics education. Well, a lot of our students that take algebra did not get a chance to take that Algebra 1 end of course exam, which is a graduation requirement, but most of the students transition to geometry, which is the typical pathway in math progression. So what we're asking the state board to do with this item is to add geometry, passing the geometry EOC, to be one of those concordant opportunities for students to demonstrate mastery in mathematics. So this is actually a really positive for the students here in the state of Florida because it's an additional pathway to meet exit criteria that we have for graduation.
Okay, we got one comment from the public. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Oliva before we go to the public? Okay, Jessica Harrington. I want to remind you, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello. My name is Jessica Harrington. I am the Teacher of the Year at Sergeant Smith Middle School here in Hillsborough County, which is one of the fastest growing areas for COVID in the state, so welcome. I'm asking for this board to add language to cancel all statewide testing for the 2020-2021 school year. Children will be choosing different options for going back to school, as we know, as we've heard, and having a standardized test is going to be, it's going to be a disadvantage for those mixed options. The test will not be equitable, especially when schools are forced to shut down again, and schools will be forced to shut down again. Make no mistake. If Florida was a country, we would rank number 9 in the world for the number of coronavirus cases. Florida has surpassed the number of cases Italy had when they went on lockdown. And what is Florida doing? We're opening Disney and opening schools. Children do get this virus, and children will have died, and they will die. What is the acceptable number of children and teachers and staff that will die when we reopen our schools? Is it 1 death? Is it 5 deaths, 100 deaths? What is the acceptable number that will shut our schools down again? And then they won't be able to take any tests. The U.S. Secretary of Education has a number. It's 14,740 children expected to die in the U.S. when we reopen schools. Is that a risk you're willing to take with your children? Does anyone in this room want that to be their children? Did you know that my colleagues are finalizing their wills as we're speaking right now? And make no mistake about it, teachers will die. Commissioner, the irony is not lost on me that when you were the House Speaker, you allowed the legislature to defund our schools and giveaways for the profit education industry, and we don't have the funding to reopen the schools safely. We do not have the money for classroom supplies. What makes you think we're going to have money for PPE? We can get back education gaps in learning. We can never get back a lost life. Please do not reopen schools.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion on item number 13, approval of the statewide standardized assessment program.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more questions? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Number 14, approval of amendment to Rule 6A-1.09401, student performance standards. Chancellor Oliva.
So thank you, Board. And this conversation is a little bit connected to the update that we've given, I just gave a little bit ago, on standards implementation. So I got to tell you, the teams that are working on making sure that our benchmarks, our clarifications, and our examples are the best that they can be. They have not put their pencils down, even though we took formal action and adopted the standards in February. They continue to work. And not only does the teams here in the department with our Bureau of Standards and Instructional Support and our Just Read Florida team keep this dialogue moving forward, because we always believe in improving and making sure we have the best product. They have stayed engaged with the teacher work groups that have committed probably at least a year of their life in supporting this work, as well as external partners. So what we're asking the board to do is to take some recommended changes and updates to the standards that we adopted in February. While most of the changes that you see in ELA are technical in nature, just providing a little bit further clarification, there's a lot more updates to mathematics. And the reason that is if you remember back in February, we had finished building out the math progressions up to about geometry. And we knew that we weren't done with courses beyond that. So this work here is courses far beyond geometry that impacts trigonometry, calculus, and other components through the math progression, which is why you see a lot more. But in May of earlier this year, on May 29th, we did a workshop to talk about all of the changes that we've had. Well, since that dialogue and work has continued, since that last workshop of publicly noticed changes in June, there are a few more that we have handed to you just now. I believe Chris has made sure that you have a couple of updates which are on those slight 2 pages that we want to add to the complete package for consideration.
Okay, do we have any questions from the board?
What?
Mr. Gibson.
This was the only typos in the entire.
There's just
pretty
a
good,
few,
actually.
Yeah, we got an incredible team that this has been their life for about the last year and a half, and it's just really exciting to see this work coming together and implement the timeline. So it's really, I'm not surprised there's just a few minor substantive changes because they did such a wonderful job in the first pass.
I appreciate your attention to detail.
All right, no other questions. I'd entertain a motion to approve rule number 6A-1.09401.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
I lost my place here. Hold on just a second. All right. Now we're going to move on to number 17. Chancellor Hebda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a request to approve a new rule 6A-14.0306, death benefits for survivors of first responders and military members. And I'm honored to bring this rule before the board today. And I will say that during the 2018-19 academic year, the Florida College System was proud and honored to serve 2,645 active duty personnel, 45,203 active National Guard members, 1,581 active reserves, 16,320 veterans, and 8,353 eligible dependents of these members. Before Senate Bill 7098 was passed in 2019, the college system was able to offer tuition waivers to spouses and dependents of deceased law enforcement, correctional and correctional officers, and firefighters. In 2019, the Senate bill expanded and amended those statutes and added benefits to include spouses or dependents of deceased first responders and members of the Florida National Guard and the United States Armed Forces. There are 6 applicable statutes that this rule implements, and I have to commend my staff, Dr. Shanna Autry, who is my Director of Academic or Student Affairs, and Dr. Carrie Henderson, who's my Executive Vice Chancellor, with the help of 2 great attorneys from Matt Mears' office, Amanda Gay and Judy Bone, put this rule together. But Dr. Autry brought it forward because she said colleges were struggling with all of the various wonderful programs to waive tuition and fees for these individuals, but having a hard time implementing them. So the rule streamlines that information and adds some efficiency and effectiveness so that colleges can help serve these family members better. As important to our nation as the men and women who serve in these roles that are listed in these statutes and rules are the families who supported them and now survive them when they have made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. This rule helps us serve those families better as they carry on with their lives and their education, and that is the rule before you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chancellor Hebda. Is there any questions from the board?
Just a quick comment.
Yes, sir.
I think I applaud you for this rule. I mean, first off, the idea that we have the state of Florida is basically saying that for law enforcement officers who die in the line of duty, first responders, and now first responders and U.S. military who pay the ultimate sacrifice, they gave their lives for us, and now we're going to step up and take care of their children and their spouses. So it's a phenomenal program the legislature passed, and I'm glad that we're clarifying it to make sure that it hopefully can be taken advantage of for those families.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Mr. Petty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to echo the comments from Member Gibson. I think, in light of the turmoil that we're seeing around the country and the unprecedented epidemic that we're all dealing with, those first responders, our law enforcement, fire and emergency personnel, and certainly our military members that have sacrificed so much to even enable us to be here today. I'm grateful for their service. I'm grateful for their sacrifices. I'm glad to see that we can do something for their families. But to those first responders especially, I am fully supportive of this. I'm glad this is something that we can do for those families who have lost something. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Any more discussion? Can I get a motion to approve the rule?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to approve the remaining consent items?
So move.
Second.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now I'd like to move to comments by the board members. Mr. Olnick?
I have no additional comments other than please everybody stay safe and thanks for the hard work. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Olnick. Mr. Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to keep in mind, as you have shown with the agenda today, that even in the midst of COVID, there's some outstanding things happening with the department and with our schools. And news regarding the Florida standards was terrific. I appreciate the update regarding that. Governor DeSantis has made clear, and we saw it again in the presentation today, that his approach to K-12 includes great teachers, and rewarding them is certainly one way of demonstrating our appreciation for those. Second point is educational choice, and third being accountability. The online option that is growing in our state is obviously another choice, and parents like choice, and parents also like the choice of bricks and mortar. So I won't repeat my earlier comments from the day, but will emphasize the harm that kids suffer by not being in school, and the importance of reopening the school, and the importance of the commissioner as the head of the Department of Education and the governor to lead. And leadership is hard. Leadership always creates different constituencies. To decide is to divide. A leader must take people where they might not want to go. They might not want to go to an open school, to bricks and mortar, and they have that choice. But we've got to have the bricks and mortar available to them. And this is not a fun spot for anyone to be in, but we've seen these kinds of epidemics and pandemics in the past. It's easy to forget and lose perspective. The Spanish flu killed as many as 100 million people. It was only 100 years ago. It really wasn't very long ago. 1957, Asian flu, 2 million people. 1968, Hong Kong flew up to 3 million people. Just 10 years ago, the H1N1 virus, which was a descendant of the Spanish flu, over 500,000. We've lived through polio, we've lived through measles, mumps, tuberculosis. We will get through this as well. And I would just say to all of us and to the commissioner, appreciate your leadership, continue to lead, be open, listen, offer help, offer choice, but please lead. Florida needs it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grady. Mr. York?
Yeah, first off, I really want to echo Commissioner Grady's comments and really appreciate not only his words just a few minutes ago, but earlier in the meeting. I certainly agree that schools, we need to reopen. Bricks and mortar is important. I look forward to my kids going back to school. I believe it can be done in a safe way. And I also want to say that it's the legislative update, the teacher pay increase, all the good policy work that's happened this past few months has been really uplifting and continues to make educating our children one of our top priorities in this state. And we're going to continue to do that. It is a challenging time. There's a lot of anxiety in our country right now, a lot of uncertainty. But to Board Member Grady's comments, we will get through it. And I am generally optimistic and positive, and I am supportive of the Commissioner's actions, and as well as the Governor's, and know that there are better days ahead for the state of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. York. Mr. Petty?
I would echo Mr. Grady's comments completely. I would also just like to thank Commissioner Corcoran for leading. I've seen multiple examples of this, by the way. It's not difficult, or it's not easy to do. It would be far easier to just sit back and watch the district sort of figure it out, but you've chosen to lead on this, and I appreciate that. I want to thank the governor for also leading, and I am optimistic we will get through this. We've got to keep the focus on why we're here and why we do what we do, which is the students. If we aren't serving them, then none of this is necessary. So, Commissioner, thank you for leading us through this.
Mr. Gibson?
I would echo my fellow board members' comments. These are challenging times, and luckily we have a commissioner who is leading, we have a governor who is leading, fully support everything they're doing and making these tough decisions. I think the one thing that's come out from this meeting is that, listen, this isn't a one-size-fits-all. But there is one thing that I think we all agree with, is that students, we cannot pause their learning. We cannot pause the ability for them to continue to progress in their education. And that has to be our first and foremost priority. So I think we've done a good job with the emergency order of laying that out, saying that's going to be our goal. We're going to make sure that students learn, and then we're going to provide flexibility. We're going to provide flexibility to the local school districts, to the school boards to determine what's the best route to do that. And then we're going to provide flexibility to parents to decide for their individual circumstance and for their individual students, what's the best option here. And that's what I think produces the best education results, when we do that and we all work together. So again, applaud your leadership, Commissioner, and thank you board members for all of your work, Chair. And as Mr. Petty said, we'll get through this.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. And I would echo again Mr. Grady's comments, Mr. Petty's comments about leadership. And we do appreciate your leadership, Commissioner Corcoran. We also appreciate the leadership of Governor DeSantis. I had to go back and remind myself exactly how much money was allocated through the CARES Act to education specifically. There's so many needs in the state, and I know that a great deal of effort has been focused on making sure we're taking care of our first responders, making sure we have testing sites available, making sure that the healthcare infrastructure is solid. But it is quite, I think, impactful that we have already set aside nearly $750 million to make sure that our schools are prepared to physically reopen in a safe way, and that we're also prepared to make sure that our students are able to recover some of that COVID slide over the course of the summer. And while we spend a lot of time focusing on academic excellence, which we should, that's our priority, I think it's important for us to remember that many of our children, especially those children who are in vulnerable situations, get a lot more than just an academic education in those physical brick and mortar buildings. And I'm very pleased that we're actually going to be able to make sure we can support these students in a whole way, and making sure that our families have options that work for whatever our situation is. So I just want to again commend the governor's leadership in making sure that we have resources available to our school districts. I also want to thank our local leaders, our local elected school boards, and our superintendents. It is not easy, and this has not been done in my lifetime because I'm not over 100 years old. So although I've had a lot of birthdays. So this is a very complicated issue. I'm sure there's probably 20 right answers, and every school district will figure out what works best for them, but I just want to encourage them to keep listening to parents, to keep focusing on every family and not trying to have a one-size-fits-all solution, and to remember that if they need resources or support or additional input, the Department of Education is available to help.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. I'll make it quick. Commissioner, thank you for your leadership and for getting these schools open back up. I fully support it. I think it's the right thing to do. I live with a teacher who feels like it's the right thing to do as well. So she's a lot smarter than I am. And to the governor for holding steady on the teacher pay increases. This, with the financial hardship that we're probably looking at going forward, that would have been a real easy thing for him to say. We just need to hold up and see what happens, but he didn't. He held steadfast on that, and that's the right thing to do, to show that our teachers are critical to our education system, obviously, and to get those pay raises in place. So thank you both for your leadership. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be August 12th in Tallahassee. Thank you all for coming.
You are watching the Florida Channel, a public service made possible by the Florida Legislature, WFSU-TV, and Florida State University.
Good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm joined by members of the Senate Democrat Caucus, the hard-working, hard-fighting members of the Senate Democrat Caucus.